Chapter 211. Greeting gift. It seemed that this little girl had a lot of secrets up her sleeve. The old beggar man rolled his eyes, and suddenly fishing a jade ring out of his pocket, he waved it in front of Dandan and asked, "Like it?" Dandan blinked his big eyes, then nodded repeatedly. The old beggar man laughed. "If you like it, then I'll give it to you. All you have to do is, the next time there's food, remember to save a bit for me." Dandan quickly rushed to him, and accepting the jade ring, he held it close to his chest. Then, glancing at the old beggar man, he eagerly ran to Hushi. Mother, the spiritual energy in this jade ring is so abundant. It's a very good item. If we were to sell it, it would certainly make a lot of crystals, so I'll give this ring to you." Up until now, Dandan still remembered that Hushi continuously said that his eating habits were making her poor. Therefore, whenever he now saw valuable things, he wanted to give them to her. If she were to then sell them, she would be able to buy food materials and cook delicious food. Hushi took the jade ring, and without needing to use her divine sense to check, she could already feel through her hand that it was something valuable. She couldn't help but extend her hand and stroke Dandan's head while praising him. "Dandan really is a good child." A corner of the old beggar man's mouth twitched as he watched this scene from the side. His abundant dragon ring that everyone in the Mi-Luo continent would forcibly take if the chance occurred. These two guys didn't know anything. They actually wanted to sell it. They were simply too ungrateful. The old beggar man glared at them, and after grunting, he then continued to gnaw on the last roasted sheep leg in his hand. Humph! For the sake of the food, he, Taoist spiritual master Xin Qing, wouldn't lower himself to the level of these two common people. Finished devouring the sheep leg, the old beggar man gazed at Hushi, yet this time, his expression became somewhat grave. Unlike before, he now no longer had the mischievous and lecherous expression of a wretched old man. "Baby doll, you really don't want to consider paying your respects to me as a master?" Hushi's expression was indifferent as she replied, "I'm not interested in a person with an unknown origin and unclear objective. Who knows if you harbor evil intentions towards my safety? Moreover, if I pay my respects towards you as a master, apart from cooking for you every day, what benefits do I get? This is a losing transaction that I don't want to do." Hearing this, the old beggar man's eyes flashed and he unexpectedly laughed, mysteriously saying, "What a joke! If you pay your respects to me, the Taoist spiritual master Xin Qing, how could you not receive any benefits? If you don't believe me, I'll give you a greeting gift." Finished speaking, the old beggar man's left hand lightly waved, and suddenly, a gale erupted within the forest, while a plume of intense pressure abruptly filled the air. Hushi still hadn't figured out what that crazy old beggar man meant, when suddenly, she felt extremely dizzy, her body feeling as if it was being ripped apart. When she returned to her senses, it was to discover that she was now in a strange place. Before her eyes stood a closed stone door. The stone door was so tall that even when Hushi looked up as far as she could stretch her neck, she was still only barely able to see the top of it. Right above the stone door, there were 3 words scrawled in a blood-red script: "Sealed Dragon Domain." Hushi was startled. Yet when she tried to figure out where this place was and turned around, it was only to find that there was a seemingly endless dark passage behind her. From a distance, it seemed as if it led to the underworld. As soon as the cowardly Dandan saw this, he immediately threw himself into Hushi's arms, shivering as he said, "Mother, is this the gate of the underworld? I'm scared." This little guy's IQ wasn't very high, but his memory was particularly good. Having heard ghost stories, he clearly remembered something like Yellow Springs, 1. Hell, the Gate of Hell, and Old Lady Ming's soup, 2. Unfortunately, his courage happened to be particularly small. Hushi was also somewhat tense, as things seemed to have exceeded her expectations and control. What was that smelly old man up to? Right at this moment, Hushi abruptly heard the old beggar man's happy laugh in her mind, and he cheekily said, "Baby doll, didn't you say that if you pay respects towards me as a master, you wouldn't get any benefits? Here, I'll give you the benefits now." 1. In ancient Chinese religion, the underworld was called Yellow Springs, Huangchuan, possibly a reference to the ubiquitous Yellow River. The Yellow Springs were not a hell where one suffers retribution, but rather a place where the souls of the departed were supposed to reside. The destination of the White Soul, Pa. Tu Mingpu, is the Lady of Forgetfulness in Chinese mythology. Mingpu serves in Du, the Chinese realm of the dead, in the 10th court. It is her task to ensure that souls who are ready to be reincarnated do not remember their previous life or their time in hell. To this end, she collects herbs from various earthly ponds and streams to make her 5-flavored tea of forgetfulness, which is then given to each soul to drink before they leave Du. The brew induces instant and permanent amnesia, and all memories of their other lives is lost. Having been purged of all previous sins and knowledge, the dead spirit is sent to be reborn in a new earthly incarnation, and the cycle begins again. Occasionally people are able to avoid drinking the brew, resulting in past life memories surfacing in children. Chapter 212. The Secret Territory opens benefit? Just for her to benefit, he had to send her to such a ghost place like this? Hushi unhappily said, "Where am I? And why on earth did you send me to such an odd place?" Ha ha ha, such a stinky girl, unable to appreciate the value of things. Didn't you see all the martial artists waiting outside Song Mountain? They're all rushing towards here. The old beggar man laughed loudly, then continued, "That's right. Behind this door is the sealed dragon domain. The secret territory that everyone is looking for. The greeting gift that this old man has given to you is pretty good, right? Quickly go inside and find your destiny." The sealed dragon domain is the secret territory? Hushi turned pale. Smelly old man, didn't I say that I didn't want to enter the secret territory? Hey, oi. She no longer heard any voice in her mind. Only Dandan's echoing sobs reached her ears. Hushi's mouth twitched, and after quickly sizing up that endlessly dark passage, she had no choice but to give up. So turning back around, she tried pushing the iron door open. At first Hushi had thought it would be impossible to push open such a mountain-like iron door with only her own strength. But who would have thought, just when her hand touched the carved pattern on the door, that a sudden burst of golden light would shine brightly before her eyes. The entrance that was originally an unremarkable gray color momentarily lit up, as if it had electricity running through it. All the carved lines on it were glowing a bright gold, lighting up the narrow passage she was in for a moment. Dandan covered his eyes with his small hooves and leaned against Hushi's shoulder as he shouted, "Mother, we're going to enter the door of hell? Will there be a lot of ghosts inside?" Hushi ignored him as she was watching as the golden light finally dispersed, and the tightly closed iron door slowly opened with a creak. In between the iron door, there was a gap only big enough for one person to pass through. This time, Hushi no longer hesitated as she directly stepped forward and walked through the gap. Since Hushi had now entered the secret territory, she was unaware that the moment the iron door had opened, the once quiet Song Mountain suddenly issued a violent rumble, followed by the entire mountain peak shaking. Countless crushed stones tumbled from the top of mountain, while beasts incessantly stampeded, and ash rained down from the west side of the mountain. Abruptly, an innumerable number of golden lights exploded into the sky. Moreover, following Song Mountain's nonstop shaking, these rays of light continued to spread until they completely covered all of Song Mountain. At the base of Song Mountain, all of the calmly waiting martial artists sitting in meditation soon started a commotion, one by one standing up to take a look. Only, they were shocked to see that erupting out of Song Mountain were thousands of golden lights, and slowly, a pale golden arched door was revealed in the lights. The peak of that arched door extended higher than they could see. Standing tall and proud, it seemed to reach through the clouds. This door was so eye-catching and humongous that people within several hundred kilometers of it could see its presence. What's going on here? All of the waiting martial artists' faces showed their shock. Why would a door abruptly appear at this time? Secret territory. The secret territory has opened, someone exclaimed. Quickly go and inform the sect elders. The secret territory has opened. In just a moment, the base of Song Mountain erupted in complete chaos. In Yanjing Imperial Palace, the Supreme Emperor's throne incessantly shook along with the earth's tremors. On the throne, A middle-aged man quickly stood up, his eyes staring at the dazzling golden lights in astonishment. Someone come. What has happened? Answering Emperor, it's Song Mountain. Song Mountain started the earthquake, and the door of emptiness has been raised. Song Mountain? The door of emptiness? Does this mean that the secret territory has opened? However, isn't it too early? The expression on Shangwan Wenji's face became one of uncertainty, and it was a while before he gravely said, "Immediately send people over to enter the secret territory and make sure to get all the treasures inside. Granted that if we can't obtain anything, we absolutely can't allow other people to obtain anything either. Do you hear me?" "Yes, Emperor." Chapter 213, Greedy People Nalan Manor. At this moment, Nalan Zhengze was respectfully sitting in a seat slightly lower than an elderly man, quietly saying, "I've already received reliable information. This time, only Gold Core Stage and Nascent Soul Stage martial artists will be able to enter the Sealed Dragon domain. Great Elder, we of the Nalan family hope to seize the treasures from the secret territory, and it's only you who are able to help us." The person who Nalan Zhengze called Great Elder was a long-bearded old man. He looked about 35 to 36 years old, but his hair and beard were completely white, while his wisdom and high cultivation base were visible in his gaze. This person was called Nalan Yinming. His cultivation base was currently the highest amongst the Nalan family, and he was also the Nalan family's prestigious Great Elder. Listening to Nalan Zhengze's words, a cold, sharp blade flashed in Nalan Yinming's eyes as he unhurriedly said, "The ancient pill prescription, primal chaos inheritance, millennium spirit fruit. No matter which one, all are priceless treasures. As long as we can get these things, our Nalan family will be able to stabilize our place in Jinling Kingdom. But it's not determined yet which expert will enter the secret territory. I'm afraid that I might not be able to take advantage of them." Nalan Zhengze slightly laughed and fished out 2 bottles of medicinal pills from his chest pocket. "Therefore, I've prepared these 2 bottles of medicinal pills for Great Elder. One bottle contains devouring spirit powder. It's able to corrode the meridians and spiritual power of a Gold Core Stage martial artist. And the remaining bottle contains a miracle elixir capable of stimulating Great Elder's cultivation base within an amount of short time. Believe me, if you have these 2 bottles of medicinal pills, you will be able to gain the upper hand in the secret territory." Nalan Yinming's eyes lit up, and he quickly took the 2 bottles of medicinal pills. Yet just as he was about to open the lid on one of the bottles, the ground suddenly started to violently shake. Dust from the ceiling rained down on them, while the antiques on the shelf clattered loudly. "What's going on? The Earth Dragon has freed itself?" Nalan Zhengze asked in bewilderment. "Not good." Nalan Yinming's complexion changed, and his figure flashed as he dashed out of the room. At this moment, the earthquake was becoming more severe. The street and public square filled with panic-stricken and shocked people. They all looked in the direction of Song Mountain, where there were continuous bursts of harsh light. Inquiring voices could be heard here and there, while everyone wore an expression of dread. Suddenly, someone pointed in the direction of Song Mountain and shouted, "Look, what is that?" Everyone looked over to the direction that person was pointing in, only to see twinkling golden lights appear as the door of emptiness slowly rose. Standing tall and imposing between heaven and earth, it was like a giant looking down at tiny ants occupying Yinjing City. "Secret territory. That's the door to enter the secret territory," someone exclaimed, his voice filled with excitement. Song Mountain's secret territory has finally opened. As soon as these words were spoken, Yinjing City was immediately in an uproar. The long heard about Sealed Dragon Domain and the legendary treasures found in Song Mountain. Both had been a hot topic these past few days. Just thinking of the chance to gain all the treasure hidden in the secret territory caused every martial artist's eyes to shine brightly. This kind of treasure, as long as one was able to take possession of just the tiniest bit of it, that would be a meteoric achievement in one's career. Who didn't have such a dream? Who didn't long for such a great opportunity? After only a moment's hesitation, a crowd of greedy people began to frantically rush towards Song Mountain. Their eyes were shining brightly and their faces were flushed, all of them deluding themselves with dreams of grandeur. At the base of Tsang Mountain, on the west side, a woman dressed in white and covered with a veil gazed at the groups of people rushing about on their flying swords from a distance. Her mouth revealed the traces of a cold sneer. People are always easily blinded by greed and desire. Focusing only on possessing the secret territory's treasures, they've forgotten that just based on their own ability that they would first have to make the unreasonable request of surviving in the secret territory. Chapter 2:14. The Door of Emptiness. Little sister Lian Ying is kind-hearted. Standing beside the woman dressed in white, a man dressed in purple robes laughed and said, "In my opinion, since this group of ants is incapable of recognizing their own abilities, it would only serve them right if they were to die. In Mi Luo continent, the weak are prey for the strong. They simply don't have any other value. If they have delusions of snatching away things that aren't rightfully theirs, then that's their own fault for overestimating their capabilities." Feng Lianing slightly laughed, but otherwise didn't respond to the man in purple robes. Instead, she gazed at the handsome young man beside her. "Brother Yu, why do you think the secret territory has opened so early?" Nangong Yu shook his head, and as he stared up at the door of emptiness bathed in a golden light, his eyes flashed. The man in purple robes laughed. "Who cares why it's opened so early? No matter what the reason, we must be the ones to get the things found inside. Little sister, when we find the treasure, you get to choose what you want first." A bright and beautiful smile plastered itself across Feng Lianying's face. "You promising alone doesn't count. What if by chance brother you and the other don't agree? What's the relationship between you and Nangong? How could he not agree?" The man in purple robes laughed as he spoke, but his tone was somewhat sour as he looked at Feng Lianing and implied more than friendship. "As for the rest, Tian Rue is your biological brother. How could he not yield to you, his baby sister?" Hearing this, Feng Lianing smiled bashfully and secretly glanced at Nangong Yu. But Nangong Yu just looked at the sky, his expression grave. Feng Lianying's heart sunk, and a dark light appeared in her eyes. Standing beside her, Ziyin observed the mood of her young Miss Fall. So suddenly moving closer to her ear, she whispered, "Miss, I wonder whether or not that young master she will also join in the fray of entering the door of emptiness. His cultivation base is only at Qi refining stage, so if he goes in, most likely he will die on the peripheral of the secret territory. Perhaps he won't even make it to the borders of the sealed dragon domain. If he were to die inside..." A corner of Feng Lianying's mouth stretched into a shallow arc. As this was happening, the beautiful eyes of the man in purple robes, which were like tranquil lakes reflecting the sun, watched as her expression became blank. At this moment, a man's deep and cold voice was heard. "Nangong, everything is ready. We can enter now." At this time, Hushi had just stepped foot into the sealed dragon domain's most inner enchantment and was completely unaware that because of her, the secret territory had opened earlier than planned. After barely entering the narrow crack in the door, Hushi abruptly felt like her body was being ripped apart and twisted. Even her soul seemed to be squeezed out. When she could finally stand firmly with great difficulty, she slowly opened her eyes, and she couldn't help but be stunned by the scene before her. Here is a strange mountain forest? Hushi's feet stepped on the dark green lawn. In front of her, there was a verdant and lush ancient tree forest, while extending into the distance, she could make out a river and mountain peaks. There even appeared to be pure white snow covering the summits. Hushi turned around and discovered that there was no longer an iron door behind. Rather, there was now a towering cliff. Growing across the surface of the cliff were hundreds of brightly colored, fragrant flowers. What is this place? How come there were all kinds of landforms centralized in one area? Especially the soil and stones of the cliff. Many different kinds of colors were visible, so it seemed like several different mountains jumbled together. Hushi took a few steps towards the direction of the forest. The trees in here were all very tall, and all extremely rich in spiritual energy. Looking into the distance at the clouds and mist curling around the tops of the trees with the bright contrasting colors, Hushi thought that it looked as beautiful as a fairyland. Dandan had already hopped down from Hushi's shoulder, and striding a few steps forward with his short hooves, He inhaled deeply through his small nose and said, "Mother, the smell in here is so nice. There's something delicious in here." Chapter 2:15. Golden Bodhi Tree. He had barely finished speaking when his eyes suddenly lit up, and he ran towards the forest. He was going so fast that Hushi had to use all her strength just to keep up. Dandan ran for a quarter of an hour before abruptly stopping, allowing Hushi to heave a sigh of relief. Yet just when she was about to tell him not to go running off again, she noticed something in front of her, and her expression suddenly changed. Less than 5 meters away from Dandan and herself, there was a golden python curled up motionlessly. Golden python. The golden python was a 6th-ranked magical beast. Amongst the existence of magical beasts, it belonged to a powerful class, its strength equal to that of a nascent soul stage martial artist. A magical beast of such rank, how could it appear here? Hushi sucked in a cold breath and slowly turned around to retreat. What a joke. With her current level being gold core stage, she would barely be able to hit him. Against a nascent soul stage golden python, she would instantly lose. However, just as Hushi was about to run away, she noticed that Dandan had returned to his original appearance, and with his small and short legs, he ran straight towards the golden python. Hushi's eyes widened in shock, and she stared blankly as she watched her small and foolish pet clinging to the giant snake's body. Releasing a hiss, the golden python started rolling its body and continuously turning over. What the fuck? Is that even possible? Hushi watched as Dandan climbed past the golden python's spiraling body and ran towards the base of a tree. Holding onto the thick and solid trunk, he started to climb up it. Hushi followed Dandan's movements with her gaze and was once again shocked. It unexpectedly turned out to be a golden Bodhi tree. Compared to the yuanyang fruit, this tree's high-level spiritual fruit simply couldn't be found anywhere on Mi Luo continent. Even the All Living Things record said that the Bodhi tree only bloomed once every 1,000 years, and that it took 10,000 years to bear any fruit. For a Bodhi tree to become a golden Bodhi tree, it had to have bloomed and borne fruit at least 10 times, causing its worth to be beyond measure. A single Bodhi fruit didn't only enhance a martial artist's cultivation speed, but was able to strengthen a martial artist's dantian and meridians, while it also helped to purify their spiritual power. As for the effects of a golden Bodhi fruit, it could be said that the advantages were in defiance of the natural order of things. Hushi's heart leapt. If she were to plant the golden Bodhi tree in her space, then wouldn't she be able to get rich? However, at this time, Dandan had rapidly been climbing up the golden Bodhi tree, plucking the golden Bodhi fruit, and then stuffing each and every one into his mouth. He also stuffed the last fruit into his mouth, even though it had yet to ripen. A corner of Hushi's mouth twitched. This little good-for-nothing glutton, how could he eat this much again? Her golden Bodhi tree and dreams of getting rich were just completely destroyed by him. Hushi no longer hesitated. With power fluctuating from her body as she used her qigong and not her spiritual power, she lightly landed at the base of the golden Bodhi tree. Then, using her hand, she gently knocked on the roots of the tree. In the blink of an eye, the golden Bodhi tree disappeared and Dandan fell from midair, his stomach distended from eating so much. As he landed on the ground with a thump, he looked up at Hushi with a foolish yet adorable expression. Hushi pointed at his small head, and just as she was about to scold him, her expression suddenly changed. Grabbing Dandan and throwing him into her space, she then leapt to the side, narrowly avoiding a fatal blow from the golden python. The golden python released a furious snarl, its big blood-red eyes staring menacingly at Hushi. And as the venom dripping down its fangs landed on the ground, a sizzling noise could be heard as the ground corroded. Why would Hushi dare to stay? Condensing the spiritual power within her body to her feet, she then rapidly ran away as fast as lightning. But no matter how fast her speed, the golden python was even faster. Obviously, its body was gigantic, yet it could somehow still move freely amongst the forest. With a fishy stench, black venom unceasingly hurtled towards Hushi. And wherever the venom landed, not even a single blade of grass was spared. Chapter 2:16. Dragon's Cry. The spiritual power within Hushy's body was slowly depleting, and realizing that the golden python was about to catch her, she decided to do something unexpected. So using her left leg, she abruptly kicked off a large tree and twisted in the air, pouncing towards the golden python. The golden python apparently didn't think that such a petty and low human, who would steal its golden Bodhi tree, was actually worth its time and would have the strength to attack back. So for a moment, it stared blankly in shock. And it was exactly at this moment, when the golden python was frozen, that Hushy all of a sudden jumped on top of its head, fiercely stabbing down on one of its blood-red eyes. However, the golden python reacted faster than Hushy had imagined it would. Just as her dagger was about to pierce its target, the golden python promptly closed its eyes. The dagger, capable of cutting iron as if it was clay, stabbed at the golden python's eyelid. Unfortunately, it failed to pierce its eye, and Hushy only managed to leave a shallow cut. The golden python let out a furious hiss, and fiercely shaking its head, it roughly flung Hushy's petite body away from itself. Next, it released a stream of rock-corroding venom. Throughout his long lifespan, he had never seen such a brazen tiny human. While he was in the middle of cultivating, this human had not only stolen all of his golden Bodhi fruit, she had even stolen the entire golden Bodhi tree. For this crime, she deserved to die 10,000 deaths. She thought she could injure me, the king of pythons, with just her small dagger. What a joke. The golden python abruptly stopped shaking its head, while pain and shock were visible in its eyes. The small scratch that Hushy had made, in a speed visible to the naked eye, suddenly started to rot and turn gray. Next, the eyeball itself began to blacken and shrivel up until finally, all that remained was an empty eye socket. The golden python had been rolling around on the ground in non-stop pain, yet suddenly, a powerful wave of spiritual power unexpectedly burst out of its body. At the same time, the golden python's tail swept towards Hushy. Hushy was still dizzy from being previously thrown off, so unfortunately, she was too late to dodge the tail. When the golden python's tail, filled with strong spiritual power, knocked into her, her body immediately flew into the air, before heavily crashing against an ancient tree. She felt like her internal organs were in so much pain from being shaken about that she couldn't breathe. And as blood trickled out from a corner of her mouth, it slowly dripped down onto a jade ring. That jade ring was the thing that Dandan had received from the old beggar man, and when Hushy's blood landed on it, a glaringly bright light abruptly burst from her body. Then, it was like the golden python's swaying head suddenly hit a transparent screen. A loud bang echoed in the area, and the golden python's body severely flew backwards. The next moment, an earth-shattering dragon's cry resounded over the entire secret territory. It was as if an ancient legend had once again begun. Hushy felt cool liquid flowing down her throat. This liquid was sweet and aromatic. Once it entered her body, it instantly changed into strong spiritual power and flowed throughout her body. This in turn made the areas of her body that were burning hot due to pain immediately cool down and become comfortable. Mother, are you all right? Don't scare Dandan. Hushy drowsily opened her eyes, and the first thing she saw was Dandan's small tear-streaked face. In his left hand, he held a slice of golden Bodhi fruit, and in his right, he held a cup of spiritual spring water. It was apparent that he had been feeding her both as he tried to see which one could save his mother. Hushy slowly stood up and discovered that she was actually in her space. The golden Bodhi tree had now been planted in the ancient rhyme's spiritual field, while the few remaining golden Bodhi fruit had become plump from the nourishment of such rich spiritual energy. After checking her own body, she found that the injuries she sustained due to the golden python's attack had now completely recovered. Unfortunately, she didn't know whether it was thanks to the effects of the golden Bodhi fruit or the effects of the spiritual spring water. The experiences this time in the secret territory had made Hushy become somewhat nervous. If she were to casually run into any more spiritual beasts that were 6th rank or above, someone of her skill set wouldn't be in any way equipped to handle them. Chapter 217. Golden Dragon. That deranged and smelly old man. Did he really want to give her a greeting gift, or did he want to kill her? Hushi grit her teeth as she cursed that smelly old beggar man. And after ordering Dandan to remain in her space, her consciousness then returned to her corporeal body. But once Hushi returned from her space, she was shocked at the scene that greeted her. Before her eyes wasn't the forest from her memories. Rather, there was now an absolutely empty room. In this room, there were several arched doors with surfaces that resembled mirrors. At this moment, they were all broken and emitting random bursts of silvery light. Laying lifeless on the ground at Hushi's feet was the golden python's body. One of its eyes was wide open and filled with dread, while its remaining eye was corroded down to the bone by Hushi's poison. Grabbing the golden python's tail and slightly lifting it up, Hushi was shocked to discover that every one of the python's bones were unexpectedly fractured, as if it was forcibly beaten by something. She then recalled that before she fainted, she had heard the sound of a dragon's cry and a glaring white light. In the end, who was it that saved her? Hushi took the golden python into her space. This was the fresh corpse of a 6th-rank spiritual beast. Its skin and venomous fangs could be made into a powerful weapon, while its meat was a rare ingredient used in refining specialist supplements. This was the perfect opportunity to make use of the python in 3 ways. After sorting out the golden python, Hushi began to examine the strange room she now found herself in. The room had no ceiling, so a few gray clouds were visible in the sky. At this moment, the clouds were constantly condensing and spreading, causing a shadow to form. Hushi was baffled at the sight of the forming shadow, when suddenly, a burst of glaring golden light exploded out from the center of it. Following that, something fell on her head with a thump, and the skin on her face felt icy smooth to the touch. What was that? Hushi was often described as having lightning-fast reflexes, so she managed to quickly grab the thing on her head and held it up in front of her eyes. When she was able to clearly see the thing in her hand, a surprised expression spread across her face. Is this a snake? This tiny golden thing that was no bigger than the thickness of her thumb was a snake? No, wait. Since when did horns grow on the top of a snake? What actually is this thing? Just then, the tiny snake in her hand slowly opened its eyes and revealed a pair of golden-purple irises. In the beginning, the tiny snake appeared weak and powerless, but after it clearly saw Hushi, it slowly said, "Brat, are you the person who helped me to undo my seal?" Brat? This little guy that was only the size of her palm actually dared to call her a brat with such a sweet voice? Hushi was dumbfounded and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What sort of thing are you? The tiny golden snake's eyes suddenly opened wide in a glare, and it angrily said, "Audacious brat. I'm the guardian beast of this secret territory, the divine golden dragon. You're only a small foundation establishment stage martial artist, and yet you dare to call me a thing? Golden dragon? Oh, so it turns out that this guy was a small dragon. No wonder horns were growing on its head. But compared with a majestic dragon that her imagination conjured up, this little thing had a puny and smelly appearance." The little golden dragon shook its small head and asked again, "I'll ask once more, was it you who helped me to undo my seal?" "What seal?" The little golden dragon's body shimmied, and suddenly, a jade ring appeared in Hushi's hand. With a glance, Hushi recognized that this was the jade ring that the old beggar man had given her. But now, the once dark green jade ring had abruptly turned a half-gold, half-red color. The little golden dragon sniffed the jade ring, then sniffed Hushi's body, before it snorted and said, as expected, "It's you. This useless little brat, who helped to undo the seal on this king. As such, this king unfortunately has no other choice but to reluctantly accept you." Reluctantly accept me? Reluctantly accept me for what? Chapter 218. Conclusion of a contract. The little golden dragon raised up half of his body and scowled at Hushi. "From now on, I have decided to let you become my master. In the future you are mine, the divine golden dragon's master. How is it? Are you happy now? Why don't you quickly kneel and thank this king for his kindness?" A corner of Hushi's mouth twitched, and she became speechless as she looked at the tiny snake in her palm that could easily be killed with just a slap. Shaking her hand, The little golden dragon fell from her palm and landed on the ground with a plop. He cut a sorry figure as he stared up at Hushi from the ground. Towering over the little snake, Hushi looked down at him and sneered. I see that you've become foolish since you were sealed away for such a long time. You want me to thank you for your kindness? Believe me, I can step on you and squish you to death instead. Audacious mortal, do you know what this king's identity is? I'm a divine golden dragon, the highest class of dragon from the dragon race. The little golden dragon was furious and stomped on the ground in frustration, but when he noticed that Hushi was refusing to acknowledge him and was instead turning around to leave, he panicked. He'd only been unsealed mere moments ago, so his strength was still weak. He wasn't even yet able to defend himself against a low-level spiritual beast. If he wanted to survive until maturity, then there was only one way, and that was to establish a contract with a human. He had been waiting in this secret territory for 1,000 years, waiting for a martial artist capable of establishing a contract with him to come. If he were to let her escape, then there was every chance that he would have to wait another 1,000 years before the next suitable martial artist would come along. All of a sudden, the little golden dragon's eyes flickered with desperation, and launching his body into the air with a swoosh, he wrapped himself around Hushi's wrist. Then, without waiting for her to react, he opened his tiny mouth and fiercely bit into one of her delicate fingers. Hushi's reaction speed was also extremely fast, and just moments after she had been bitten, she had already ripped the little golden dragon off and thrown him away from her. But it was too late. Golden light suddenly radiated from her body, and a pattern of fine gold lines appeared engraved around the bite mark on her finger. After flashing brightly for a moment, the pattern then disappeared without a trace, as if it had never even been there. Yet, if one were to use their divine sense to examine her body closely, it was possible to see a golden pattern within her dantian. The little golden dragon rolled about on the ground and burst into a fit of laughter. We've already concluded a master and spirit pet equality contract. Now, you won't ever be able to abandon this king. Hushi waved her finger in the air, even though the wound on it had already healed. Then, with a gloomy expression, she unhurriedly made her way towards the little golden dragon. The little golden dragon was intimidated by her imposing manner, and shrinking his body as much as he could, he immediately raised his voice and said, Don't you dare hit me. We've already concluded a master and spirit pet equality contract. Due to the contract, if you use any martial artist techniques on me, you'll also experience any injuries that I do. Hushi lifted the little golden dragon up and pinched it as she sneered. You think I need to use a martial artist technique on you to beat you up? Are you joking? Believe it or not, all I need to do is slowly peel your skin away, then slice your flesh into thin strips, and I'll have succeeded in making 8 treasures snake soup. The little golden dragon stared at the dark smile on Girl's face and became terrified, his courage freezing with his fear. What? She's obviously only a useless foundation establishment stage martial artist. Yet why did he feel so much dread when he faced her, compared to when he faced his previous masters? The little golden dragon had always gotten away with bullying his previous masters, but now, Hushi's intimidation tactics were more than enough to make him shiver with fear. His loftiness immediately disappeared without a trace as he pleaded, Master, don't get angry. Now that the master and spirit pet contract with me has already concluded, you're able to obtain countless benefits. Hushi raised an eyebrow as she looked at him with distrust. What benefits? The little golden dragon saw that there was an opportunity to placate her, and he promptly became excited. Twisting his tiny body to and fro on Hushi's hand, he rapidly began to chatter away. Master, the reason you entered this secret territory was to hunt for treasure, right? I'll tell you a secret. This secret territory was made for me by my previous master, so all the treasures in this secret territory belong to me. It's up to me who I wish to grant them to. Hushi looked at him suspiciously. With just your words alone, why should I believe you? Chapter 219, Inheritance, What's Wrong with Me? The little golden dragon's body twisted in anger. I said that I'm a divine golden dragon. If you don't believe me, then look for yourself. After saying this, a fine golden ball of light abruptly shone out of the little golden dragon's mouth. Next, it floated down and lit up with a reflective surface in front of its body. Suddenly, the surface of this mirror-like ball that was shrouded by a golden light began to ripple. Then, as the ripples began to spread outwards, the scene of a desert slowly became visible. In this desert scene, countless giant fire ants were attempting to devour many martial artists who were screaming as they fled in fear. Amongst the martial artists, there was one that was slower than the rest. And unfortunately, this martial artist happened to stumble, allowing the giant fire ants the opportunity to catch up to him. In the blink of an eye, the giant fire ants converged on him as one, completely devouring his flesh until nothing but chalky white bones remained. The little golden dragon was clearly pleased with himself as he said, "This king's previous master was very powerful. In this secret territory, he created various kinds of locations with different atmospheres, and every location is unusual as each one has a different trial. The further in the secret territory a martial artist explores, the crueler and more severe the trials become. Of course, the greater the trial, the greater the treasure hidden in that location will be. Take this group of martial artists, for example. It's obvious that they lack strength, and yet they still dared to enter the third domain of the secret territory, blinded by their greed. It's only natural that they would die." The little golden dragon spat out several more golden light balls, allowing Hushi to see what was currently happening in other locations across the secret territory. These golden light balls showed miniature copies of locations in the secret territory. Each scene would show things like deserts, forests, marshlands, and also glaciers. Furthermore, every location seemed to be filled with some sort of dangerous secret, as from time to time a martial artist would appear, only to perish not long after in a violent disaster. Amongst these martial artists, there were even a few experts at the peak of Meridian stage. Although Hushi was somewhat puzzled. Why did it seem like her experiences were different compared to everyone else's? Even though she was the one who had found the golden python, it clearly wasn't as bad a trial as what others seemed to be dealing with now. The little golden dragon seemed to know what Hushi was thinking, and appeared proud as he said, "Master, you directly entered the inner core of the secret territory through the sealed dragon domain door. Of course you wouldn't need to pass through those trials." After saying that, he couldn't help but be smug as he said, "Hee, so how is it? This secret territory is awesome, right?" Hushi stroked her chin as she asked, "You said this secret territory belongs to you?" "Of course." The little golden dragon proudly wagged his tail. "Then, can you get the hidden treasures for me?" The little golden dragon's figure stiffened, before his tiny claws started waving in the air. Unfortunately, that's out of the question for the time being. My previous master said that he had left the treasure hidden in this secret territory for me, Luo Continent's chosen person. Even if you're now my master and want those treasures, you still have to pass a trial." Seeing the contempt on Hushi's face, the little golden dragon immediately felt that his dignity was wounded and promptly shouted, "But I know where the most precious treasures are. I can take you there." Hushi blandly asked, "Oh, then what is the most precious treasure found in this secret territory?" "It's me, of course." The little golden dragon didn't have a trace of modesty as he used his claws to pat his chest. Hushi's expression remained unmoved and caused the little golden dragon to feel wronged. So he poked a claw at her as he said, "Originally, I was the most useful. Anyway, apart from me, the most precious treasure here is certainly my previous master's inheritance. My previous master's inheritance is on the level of being divine. There's only one in all of me Luo continent." "Inheritance? What kind of inheritance?" Hushi inquired. "Ah," the little golden dragon suddenly exclaimed. "A group of people just entered the inner core of this secret territory. It'll certainly be because they want to snatch the inheritance for themselves. Quickly, we have to go to Zijin Palace." Chapter 220, Determination. Hushi glanced at what the little golden dragon was looking at, and saw a woman dressed in a white muslin dress. The woman's face was covered with a veil as with a burst of spiritual power. She landed on the patch of grass that Hushi had previously been standing on. Her beautiful eyes gleamed like water reflecting sunlight as she examined her surroundings, and as she turned to look in the direction of the forest, a determined expression appeared on her face. Just then, a gentle breeze reached the woman and lifted her veil, revealing an elegant, exquisite, and cold mien. "It's Feng Lian. Hushi's brows rose in surprise, and suddenly, before her eyes, a towering and majestic palace appeared before her. The entire structure of this palace was enveloped by a purple light, and next to it, countless silver bells hung around an octagonal pavilion. When the wind swept past, a sweet, melodious sound could be heard. The little golden dragon looked at the forest behind him and relief spread across his face. Fortunately, she's only just arrived at the verdant golden forest, so there's still some time left. Master, quickly go in. You must pass the test to receive the inheritance before she comes." Hushi's deep eyes glanced back at the forest, before she then walked into Zijin Palace. While standing in the forest, Feng Lian held a jade tablet in her hand, the corners of her mouth showing the hints of a cold smile. This jade tablet was a treasure that her master had given to her before she departed. With this jade tablet, she had been able to pass through the door of emptiness and bypass layer upon layer of restrictions, until finally, she had been delivered to the inner core of the secret territory. While other people were still fighting for their lives in the outer layers of the secret territory, she was now close to the treasure hidden in the secret territory's inner core. In addition to the inheritance hidden in Zijin Palace, she was also determined to get a treasure her master had told her about, a priceless golden Bodhi tree. As long as she was able to get her hands on a few golden Bodhi fruit, she would be able to immediately advance her cultivation base. That's right, when she was finally able to give one golden Bodhi fruit to Brother Yu, he would certainly be very grateful towards her. Thinking of Nangong Yu, a shy yet happy smile appeared on Feng Lianying's face. Unfortunately, even though she had followed the directions on the tablet to the location of the golden Bodhi tree, when she arrived, she was shocked to discover that it had disappeared. Even the golden python that her master had warned her was guarding the golden Bodhi tree. Both of them had completely disappeared. How could the golden python and the golden Bodhi tree both have disappeared without a trace? How could this be? Abruptly, Feng Lianing noticed something, and crouching down, she lightly stroked a few marks on the ground. This is human blood? So someone came, defeated the golden python, and took away the golden Bodhi tree? However, how was this possible? The golden Bodhi tree needs to be planted in divine soil to survive. If it's planted into ordinary soil, it will immediately wither and die. In the end, which wretch stole the golden Bodhi fruit? Even going so far as to destroy the entire golden Bodhi tree, since divine soil is impossible to find in Mi Luo continent. Feng Lianing gnashed her teeth as she looked at the empty hole where the tree had been. Suddenly, her expression changed. These marks are new, so obviously someone came here just a moment ago. In that case, wouldn't the person who stole the golden Bodhi tree also be aiming to snatch away the Zijin Palace inheritance? Thinking of this, Feng Lianing suddenly froze, before her figure was as swift as a phantom as she rapidly flew forwards. She was thoroughly prepared when she entered the secret territory. She even had a way to deal with a high-level martial artist on nascent soul stage. The golden Bodhi fruit and Zijin Palace inheritance were the two things she was determined to win. For the golden Bodhi fruit, it was first come, first served. So even though she felt distressed at the thought of someone else having them, with her skills, sooner or later she would find a method to force that person to spit them out. However, there was only one Zijin Palace inheritance. If it was snatched by someone, even if she were to kill that scoundrel, she still wouldn't be able to get it back. Therefore, she must hurry and catch up to that hateful thief before he receives the inheritance and kill him. Chapter 221. Zijin Palace. As soon as Hushi entered Zijin Palace, she couldn't help but crinkle her eyebrows. From the outside, it seemed like Zijin Palace was very imposing and majestic, but once you had walked through the entrance, you were presented with an absolutely empty room. After entering, the entire room was plainly visible. It was approximately only 100 square meters in size, and there didn't appear to be any stairs or doors leading into other rooms. It seemed that Zijin Palace's interior didn't match the exterior. The most eye-catching thing in the room was an earth-based 8-trigram engraved in the center of the room on the floor. Arranged in the center of it was a huge purple-gold furnace. From its outward appearance, it appeared somewhat old-fashioned and unremarkable, yet at first glance, Hushi had felt that this furnace must be 100 times more precious than the furnace in Hell King Manor. It seemed that the owner of Zijin Palace was an alchemist master, so the inheritance here is also related to alchemy? Thinking of this, Hushi's interest rose a bit. Although she had the overflowing cauldron pill scripture in her hands, many of the spiritual plants required for refining couldn't be found in Miluo continent. In fact, most were unheard of. Moreover, apart from the overflowing cauldron pill scripture, she didn't actually have any refining tools. If the inheritance of Zijin Palace included treasures like this furnace, then that's great. The little golden dragon on Hushi's arm shook his head, and with a proud and arrogant expression on his face, he said, "Little girl, do you see it? This is what countless martial artists yearn for. They all dream of obtaining the divine-level inheritance of Zijin Palace. If you want to know how to begin the acceptance test, you have to properly serve this king." The little golden dragon was still speaking when it suddenly grunted in shock and looked at Hushi with an unreadable expression. A small, light golden ball of spiritual fire was flickering on Hushi's fingertips before she then gently tossed it into the furnace. As soon as the light golden ball of spiritual fire entered the furnace, it began to spread along the furnace wall, forming an irregular circle. While this was happening, the color of the flame kept changing. The little golden dragon pointed at the ignited furnace, stuttering, How did you know you must release spiritual fire in there?" "No, that's wrong. Girl, aren't you only on foundation establishment stage? Since when has a martial artist on foundation establishment stage been able to release spiritual fire and, moreover, a very high-level spiritual fire? This is simply, really, at first he had only wanted to show off in front of this girl, to have her properly serve him, to make her beseech him for half a day, and then he would share a wisp of his dragon fire with her. Who knew she would unexpectedly open up the test of inheritance using spiritual fire that only a martial artist higher than foundation establishment stage should possess? In the end, what's the identity of this girl? Hushi ignored the little golden dragon's shock and approached the side of the furnace, checking on the state of the spiritual fire. But just as she was about to approach the furnace, abruptly, an intense purple light bloomed in front of her eyes. Soon after, a wisp of light gray smoke curled upwards from the center of the furnace towards her face. Hushi was shocked and instinctively wanted to avoid it. Just then, she heard the anxious shouts of the little golden dragon. "Hey, don't move. Stupid girl, that is the divine sense's mark and represents the start of the test. Why on earth are you avoiding it?" Hushi stopped moving, and that wisp of light gray smoke quickly bore into the space between her eyebrows. The next moment, a powerful surge of spiritual power encircled her entire body, causing her consciousness to become blurry. And so, the light gray smoke steadily continued to drift out of the furnace and surround Hushi. Gradually, it covered her whole body, making it seem like she was merging with the smoke. Chapter 222, Maha Inheritance. The little golden dragon's voice lost its proud and lovably annoying tone as it turned solemn, heavily resonating in Hushi's ears as it said, "Now that your mind has been imprinted with the previous owner's divine knowledge, the door to the trial has officially opened. Remember, when you accept the trial you have to concentrate, you cannot get distracted and don't stop. If the test is interrupted, it will lead to your cultivation base being broken off, and you will lose your life. Do you understand?" Hushi nodded slightly, and soon after slowly dispelled the distracting thoughts in her mind. Closing her eyes, she entered a meditation practice mode, and so the light gray smoke curling around Hushi's body slowly gathered together, gradually disappearing into her, as if completely melding with her. With that, She felt a mysteriously powerful force enter her body in a split second, causing her whole person to feel like it had been brought into a void. The spiritual power in her body began to move uncontrollably, and the empty space in her dantian where it had been stored slowly started to grow larger. Steadily, her cultivation base that had already attained foundation establishment stage began to rise. Hushi felt delighted. She hadn't expected that the inheritance of Zijin Palace would unexpectedly enhance her cultivation base. Could it be that this inheritance didn't only involve alchemy and wasn't so simple? However, the next moment, Hushi's complexion suddenly changed. An intense pain came from her chest, and soon after, a pain that felt like someone was using a blade to cut into her meridians and 4 limbs spread throughout her body in a flash. Next, Hushi felt like countless ants were creeping along her bones and biting her bone marrow. Such pain was beyond what an ordinary person would be able to endure. Arg! The sound of a groan slipped out from Hushi's mouth. She wanted to abandon her meditative position and examine what was happening with her body. Just then, a deep and magnetic voice leisurely spoke in her ears. If you desire to learn my Maha inheritance, spirit, determination, innate talent, not a single one is indispensable. Little girl, your innate talent is pretty good, but it's still far from enough. If you want to receive my Maha inheritance, you must first go through a burning heart and eroding bones, forged body and refined soul trial. This can be regarded as a beginner qualification. Burning heart and eroding bones? Forged body and refined soul? Hushi resisted the pain with great difficulty, and lifting her eyes, she was bewildered as she saw the slender figure of a man. The man's features were indistinguishable, but his body emitted a one-of-a-kind presence. Like he had an immortal aura, one that could make people unconsciously want to lower their guard and bow in reverence. Hushi forced herself to concentrate with great difficulty and looked at him as she asked, "Are you the master of this secret territory?" The man smiled faintly, shaking his head as he said, "I'm merely the remaining imprint from Zijin's soul, the divine knowledge, so I'm not really the master. Little girl, the pain of burning heart and forged body you experienced just a moment ago was merely the beginning, a small sample. The real pain is simply unimaginable. If you want to back out now, I can break off the inheritance imprint for you, and you won't be hurt." Hushi frowned but didn't speak. The man sighed and said, "Ordinary people absolutely aren't able to endure the pain of burning heart and forged body. Little girl, since your cultivation base is only at foundation establishment stage, it's absolutely impossible for you to pass. This is the reason I set up restrictions so that only gold core stage martial artists or higher can enter the secret territory's inner core. If you choose to give up now, you won't lose anything, but once the trial starts, you will undoubtedly die if you fail to pass. Ordinary people can't endure it? But since when was she, Hushi, an ordinary person?" Thinking back, this was like the time when she was still training in the organization. She sat with her eyes closed in a cage, and she didn't eat or drink for 3 days and nights straight. During that time, she wrestled with her comrades and fought with wild animals, and when she came out, none of the flesh on her body was still intact. Chapter 223. Do your best at that time. In order to complete missions, she could motionlessly lurk in a wilderness full of poisonous insects for 7 days and nights, all for the purpose of striking the lethal blow. So would an insignificant pain like burning heart and forged body make her yield? Hushi sneered, her gaze suddenly becoming resolute. "What should I do to pass this trial?" The man seemed surprised for a moment, then he lightly laughed. "I really haven't seen such determined eyes for quite a while." After a pause, his smile vanished and he continued, "Passing this first trial is actually very simple. You only need to keep circulating your spiritual power around your body during this painful torture until the trial ends. Remember, your spiritual power must keep moving. It can't stop even for a moment. If it stops, your bones and meridians will immediately be jolted apart and you'll die. Little girl, don't think that this kind of trial is very easy. With such a tremendous amount of pain, your mind will be unable to concentrate, while your divine sense will also become weaker. If you want to control your spiritual power, you must use willpower and determination 100 times more focused than usual. I understand. Hushi's face was tranquil as she nodded, not a trace of nervousness or fear in her eyes. A touch of admiration flashed in the man's eyes, and he lightly laughed as he said, "Since that's the case, then let's begin." The man's voice had just faded when a portion of ice-cold spiritual power wrapped around Hushi's body. In a flash, intense pain assaulted her forelimbs, bones, and internal organs once again. However, this time, she clenched her jaws tightly, sat cross-legged, and closed her eyes as she steadily began to circulate her spiritual power. A corner of the man's mouth hooked up, and as the dense mist that covered his face dispersed, it revealed refined and handsome features. His pensive gaze landed on Hushi as she meditated cross-legged on the floor, and it was quite a long time before he chuckled, "Little girl, if you really are able to endure this trial, then there will be great benefits to your cultivation in the future. But really, the fact remains that passing this trial is extremely difficult, so do your best, you." For a martial artist only on foundation establishment stage, enduring a trial of such severe torture of her willpower and determination will help wield her soul into something extremely stable. Afterwards, when she advances and encounters the demon inside her heart and bottlenecks, she will be able to break through with far less effort than other martial artists. A foundation establishment stage martial artist wants to obtain the Maha inheritance? Interesting. The man's voice slowly faded out, and his figure gradually disappeared in the void. Only Hushi remained in the void, maintaining a meditative position as she endured the acutely painful torment. And so at this moment in Zijin Palace, the little golden dragon was lying on his stomach across Hushi's shoulders with a pleased expression on his face as he continuously absorbed the overflow of spiritual power coming off of Hushi's body. He was using this spiritual power to flush the impurities out of his body, resulting in his previously dull dragon scales to slowly become glossy and shiny. On top of that, his small body, which had only been about the length of a finger, had also slightly lengthened. You, this rotten egg, you deceived my mother. I'll beat you to death." Abruptly, the little golden dragon felt his body heavily hit by someone, and as he immediately stumbled and fell from Hushi's shoulder, he heard the voice of an angry child. The little golden dragon was lucky, and narrowly avoided the miserable fate of falling to the ground by using his tail and hooking it around Hushi's neck. As soon as he had steadied himself and looked up, he saw a pink little pig standing not too far away and glaring straight at him with anger in his eyes, as if he wanted to skin him alive. The little golden dragon saw this adorable little pig, and he didn't know why, but his anger at being hit was suddenly doused, like water being poured over fire. He subconsciously used a slightly gentler voice as he asked, "Where did you come from, little pig? How can you enter Zijin Palace? Don't you know it's very dangerous here?" Chapter 224. Conversation between spirit pets. "You're a bad guy. Don't fake kindness. I already know you deceived Mother into accepting that something inheritance, so now Mother is in pain. If Mother dies, I'll bite you to death." What? This little pink pig was without a doubt Dandan. He and Hushi's life essences were connected. In Hushi's space, he saw all that Hushi experienced, and although he couldn't feel what she was feeling, he still knew that something was wrong. He didn't quite understand the meaning of inheritance, but what he did know is that his mother was now in pain, a lot of pain, and he didn't want his mother in pain. The little golden dragon gaped in shock, and glancing at the pale complexion of Hushi as she meditated next to him, he suddenly had a realization and said, "You're this little girl's spirit pet? Ah, is her brain rotten? How could she accept such a useless little pig as her spirit pet?" One must know that once a martial artist accepts a spirit pet, he's accepting them for a lifetime. The spirit pet and the martial artist's life essence will then be strongly tied together. Because the contract between a martial artist and a spirit pet consumes a lot of life essence, a martial artist wouldn't usually accept a useless animal as a spirit pet. He's the majestic golden dragon, and now he's unexpectedly become a spirit pet together with this little pig. This This is too outrageous. Dandan isn't a little pig. Dandan was so angry that his both cheeks bulged. Then, after he pounced towards this hateful little dragon, he bit him on his tail. Scoundrel, you better return my mother. Return my mother now. Ow, don't bite, don't bite. The little golden dragon shouted and cried. He wanted to shake off this little pig, but since his tail was being bitten by him, he couldn't even use his techniques and could only shout, "Your mother has a great opportunity, and if she can endure this trial, she can gain countless benefits. How are you not able to differentiate between good and bad, and instead, you prefer to question my good intentions?" Dandan finally released the little golden dragon's tail, yet his expression was one of profound sadness rather than relief. But I heard that handsome big brother say that if mother doesn't pass the trial, that she will die. What? Dandan doesn't want mother to die. Rest assured, your mother is extremely powerful, so she'll definitely pass this trial. It isn't that difficult, so don't cry. Dandan rubbed at his tears as he happily asked, "Really? Mother will really be okay?" Of course. The little golden dragon felt guilty and averted his eyes, then laughed out loud. "I'm your mother's newly accepted spirit pet. Since master and spirit pet share both honor and disgrace, how could I deceive her?" Hearing that, Dandan immediately lit up with a happy smile, and he looked at the little golden dragon with a gaze brimming with kindness and adoration. The little golden dragon's conscience felt heavier, and he kept his gaze averted. What he didn't say was that the agreement sealed between himself and Hushi was an equality contract, and that he had only urgently signed the contract with Hushi because she had the abundant dragon ring. The abundant dragon ring had been necessary for him to be able to untie the seal, allowing him to leave that sealed space. As long as he could leave that sealed space, he would be able to slowly gain his strength back. In the future, when his strength surpassed Hushi's, it wouldn't be a difficult matter to undo the contract and dump her. And if Hushi died during their contracted time, the little golden dragon would naturally receive some damage, but it would only be a minor injury, with his cultivation base dropping a little. Later on, he could still find another person to sign a contract with him again. But seeing this adorable little pink pig's worshipping expression before his eyes, the little golden dragon suddenly thought that maybe becoming this little girl's spirit pet wasn't so bad. "Oh, how about I find a way that will allow her to pass the trial?" The little golden dragon coughed, but just as he was about to speak, his expression abruptly changed slightly and he whispered, "Don't speak, someone's coming." Chapter 225. Feng Lianying's Jealousy, One Dragon and One Pig. Both of them quietly and rapidly moved to the door frame and peeped out through a crack. What they saw was an elegant woman dressed in a white muslin skirt standing straight outside the palace, her bright eyes deeply examining Zijin Palace. The little golden dragon laughed mischievously and complacently said, "I don't know what methods that brat used to enter the secret territory's internal core, but it won't be so easy for her to enter Zijin Palace. If it weren't for me lending a hand to your mother, she absolutely wouldn't have been able to reach the entrance of Zijin Palace. So rest assured, for the time being she won't come inside, and by the time she does manage to enter, your mother's acceptance of the inheritance will already be completed." Receiving even more of Dandan's worshipping gaze, the little golden dragon triumphantly nodded his small head. However, the next moment, the proud look on his face turned into one of shock. Watching outside the palace, he noticed that the woman dressed in white took out the piece of a jade tablet, and as her red lips lightly moved, the jade tablet flew high in the air and suddenly released a blue light. In the next moment, the door of Zijin Palace unexpectedly opened itself without even a gust of wind, and the woman standing outside the palace laughed quietly as she slowly walked towards the door. The little golden dragon's complexion changed greatly, and with a strong burst of wind under his feet, two small bodies rose into the sky and quickly fled forwards, sliding to hide under a corner of the lower hem of Hushi's skirt. Feng Lianing retrieved the jade tablet, and as she faced the wide-open door of Zijin Palace, a smile full of relief appeared on her face. Since Zijin Palace hadn't disappeared, and the restriction on the door was still there, then that meant that the inheritance hadn't been taken away yet. That's great. Luckily, she came fast enough. And fortunately, she had this spell-breaking jade tablet in her hands that was given to her by Master, so she could easily enter Zijin Palace. Feng Lianing leisurely marched into the palace, and since the inside of the palace wasn't all that large, she could see what was currently happening with just a glance. Sitting cross-legged and concentrating beside Zijin furnace was Hushi. Feng Lianying's eyes suddenly widened, and a mysterious light of disbelief flashed in her eyes. It's that stinky boy. Precisely the one who was extremely intimate with Brother Yu. That bullshit personal doctor. However, isn't his cultivation base just at Qi refining stage? How could he enter the internal core of the secret territory? And how could he even attempt to receive Zijin Palace's inheritance trial? Did he also use a secret method to bypass the restrictions of the secret territory? Who was it that helped him to come here and compete in gaining the inheritance with me? Don't tell me. Was it Brother Yu? With this thought, Feng Lianying's elegant features twisted, her gaze brimming with hate and bitter resentment as she looked at Hushi. There were no lights or windows in Zijin Palace, but there was a kind of radiance in the palace that lit everything up, and at this moment, that radiance was shining upon Hushi's face. This light clearly revealed a flawless complexion before Feng Lianying's eyes. Lips the color of vermilion, eyebrows such a deep black that they seemed like they were painted, and skin as perfect as white jade. Exquisite and translucent. His long eyelashes fluttered like tiny fans and cast faint silhouettes upon his cheeks. Even though this was the face of a man, it was actually more outstanding than her own to some degree. What if this was a woman? What kind of evildoer would she be? And what kind of peerless talent and devastatingly beautiful woman would she be? Feng Lianing firmly gritted her teeth, and suddenly, a corner of her mouth stretched into a sly smile. Heaven has a path yet you don't walk down it, while hell has no door yet you insist on charging in. Today, you will die in here, and there's no one to blame but yourself for overestimating your capabilities and delivering yourself to my door. Humph. You're just an insignificant and useless person on Qi refining stage, and yet you unexpectedly attempted to snatch away Zijin Palace's inheritance from me. Death is the only repayment you deserve. With that, Feng Lianying raised her sword and unhurriedly moved towards Hushi, the edge of her sword approaching Hushi's flawless face little by little. This is the face that made her, Feng Lianing, feel both loathing and jealousy. If she destroyed it, she wondered if Brother Yu would treat him differently. Chapter 226. Raging Blue Ice Flames. Did you rely on this face to seduce Brother Yu? Hee hee hee. What type of dignified man uses his appearance to serve people? You're really shameless. Since you have no sense of shame, then I'll destroy this face first, and then when you die, I'll let everyone know how despicable you are. The powerful sword edge was just about to touch Hushi's face. However, Hushi was completely oblivious to what was happening around her. She was too busy enduring the sharp torture necessary to receive the inheritance in the void. Hiding in the hem of Hushi's skirt, Dandin's eyes turned red blood, and he was so angry that he was about to rush out and beat that hateful woman to death. The little golden dragon covered Dandin's mouth and whispered quietly in his ear, "Don't worry, watch me." The next moment, all of Zijin Palace abruptly started to quake slightly, and following that, a low and imposing voice slowly said, "It is forbidden to fight inside Zijin Palace. Those who dare violate this law shall be banished from the palace, and will never be allowed to enter again." Feng Lianying's sword was just about to hit Hushi, but it suddenly halted in mid-air, and turning pale with fright, she withdrew her sword and started looking all around. The palace was still the size of about 100 square meters. There wasn't the trace of a person's shadow, and it didn't seem like anything was odd. With bewilderment plastered across her face, she thought about her perfect preparations for visiting the secret territory. Her master had practically told her everything she needed to take note of in Zijin Palace, and of course that included how to pass through every spirit treasure restriction. Yet even with all that, he didn't mention that you couldn't fight in Zijin Palace. Master had even said that in order to prevent someone from entering Zijin Palace and snatching the inheritance, he had specially prepared a powerful spirit weapon that was guaranteed to be foolproof. However, why now did Zijin Palace warn her that fighting was prohibited? The little golden dragon's purple-gold eyes widened in nervousness as he peeked out from under Hushy's clothes, his scales sticking up all over his small body. The woman before his eyes was merely a minor gold core stage martial artist. If it was the him of the past, then with just a simple slap, she would have been annihilated into a puff of smoke. However, his seal had only just been removed, so he was still in the form of a young dragon. He was currently unable to defeat Hushy, let alone a gold core stage martial artist. Therefore, he could only mimic his original master's tone to scare her into retreating and hope that she didn't dare act rashly. If that still didn't make this woman stop, then he couldn't do anything about it anymore. He could only abandon the little pink pig and flee. Luckily, Feng Lianying's eyes flashed, and eventually, she unwillingly glanced at Hushy with ruthlessness flashing in her eyes. Your life may be great, but your luck, it won't be so good every time. Now for her, the most important thing is the inheritance of Zijin Palace. It was for this reason that they, the Luli sect, had paid a great price. Only then had they been able to be well prepared. They absolutely wouldn't allow any mistakes. As for this stinky boy, with his cultivation base at just Qi refining stage, he wouldn't be able to cause any trouble in any way. There will be more opportunities to kill him in the future. Thinking until here, Feng Lianying withdrew her long sword and fished out a jade box from within her sleeve. When she opened the jade box, the wisp of an ice blue-colored flame sprang out from the jade box before it then fluttered in the air and fell into the furnace. This ice blue flame was a 5th-level raging blue ice flame that her master had found after searching everywhere for it. Once it was found after searching through many treasures, it was given to her to help her with refining. Unfortunately, her current cultivation base rank wasn't high enough, so therefore she was unable to subdue the fire within her body. As soon as the ice blue-colored flame entered Zijin furnace, it slowly burned within the furnace wall. Feng Lianying had thought that as soon as her raging blue ice flame entered the furnace, that it would absorb Hushy's low-grade spiritual fire, and then at that time she wouldn't have to move her hands as Zijin Palace would judge Hushy's trial as a failure and she would die. However, contrary to Feng Lianying's expectations, once her raging blue ice flame encountered the light golden-colored flame that had already been in the furnace, it unexpectedly dulled in an instant. Chapter 227. The pain of burning heart and forged body. Although the flame wasn't extinguished, the ice blue-colored flame was obviously shrinking. It seemed to be dodging the light gold-colored flame as it cowered to the side and didn't dare approach. Shock was written across Feng Lianying's face, and following that, her gaze became twisted and rage-filled as she stared at Hushy. Her raging blue ice flames were a 5th-level spiritual fire. When it encountered common low-level flames, it would swallow them whole. But this stinky boy's spiritual fire not only didn't become extinguished, it actually subdued her raging blue ice flames. How was this possible? In the end, what was the level of his spiritual fire? And who was it that helped him to subdue such formidable spiritual fire? Don't tell me, was it Brother Yu? That's right, it was definitely Brother Yu. Without Brother Yu's help, how could he, a boy of Qi refining stage, have such opportunities and abilities? Thinking of this, an intense murderous desire surged forth in Feng Lianying's heart, and she had an almost irrepressible urge to kill him on the spot. However, at this moment, the raging blue ice flame in the furnace was accepted, and a wisp of gray smoke wafted out, launching into the space between Feng Lianying's eyebrows. Feng Lianying inhaled a few deep breaths, and with great difficulty she was able to suppress the killing intent in her heart. Then, sitting cross-legged on the mat before her, she began to receive the test. Moments after entering the inheritance void, Feng Lianying noticed Hushy sitting cross-legged a certain distance away. Currently, Hushy's forehead was covered with beads of sweat, and her lips trembled slightly. As it was clear that she was withstanding a tremendous amount of pain, Her once moist red lips had cracked and lost all color. Like before in this void, the shadowy imprint of Zijian's soul appeared and informed her about receiving the test. Feng Lianying's face was filled with confidence as she nodded, and soon, the image of Zijian's soul imprint disappeared. At the same time, a portion of ice-cold spiritual power wrapped up her entire body. In the next moment, Feng Lianying's complexion changed greatly as she let out a blood-curdling screech. So painful. It felt like all the bones and meridians in her body were being ripped apart. This kind of pain absolutely wasn't something that normal people could endure. Since childhood, she, Feng Lianying, had had everything run smoothly and had always been hailed as a genius. Sought after by everyone, many people had attempted to gain her favor. With all this, how could she now bear this kind of pain? Could it be that that boy called Shiyu, who was sitting opposite her, had also been enduring this kind of torment? How could this be possible? This type of pain. How could this be called a test? Wasn't this simply asking for a human life? She, a gold core stage martial artist, was unable to endure it, let alone an insignificant chi refining stage martial artist. So how could that brat possibly survive? This loathsome youngster will certainly die in this inheritance void. A corner of Feng Lianying's mouth lifted into a wicked smile, and from her pocket she fished out a medicinal pill and stuffed it into her mouth. Soon, the pain all over her body faded away without a trace, and Feng Lianying's face was full of pride as she lightly laughed. Fortunately, Master prepared this earlier. All I need to do is swallow this spirit powder pill, and I won't need to endure the pain of burning heart and forged body, allowing me to pass this test effortlessly. As for this boy called Shiyu, since he's just a chi refining stage martial artist, how could he ever hope to survive? Seeing how much he's suffering now, perhaps he won't be able to endure it much longer. At that time, wouldn't the inheritance be hers? Feng Lianying sneered, then, closing her eyes and meditating, she effortlessly prepared to wait for the test to end. At the same time, Hushi was currently experiencing a hell-like, boundless pain. Her every meridian, every joint, and even every drop of her blood seemed to be burning and freezing all at once. On top of that, it felt like countless ants were biting her body, causing her so much agony that she wanted to scream and shout, as well as scratch her own flesh off little by little to ease the pain. However, despite her body being in such terrible pain, from the beginning, in her mind, there had constantly been a part of her that was clear-headed. This part was reminding her, was insisting for her, to become stronger. Chapter 228, Becoming Stronger Again. She didn't want to return to the days when she was taken advantage of and humiliated. She didn't want to lose her freedom and become a puppet. She desired a part of the world she could call her own, so no one would dare look down on her and humiliate her. She wanted to possess a supreme power that would help her to protect the people who were important to her, and the strength to punish those who would injure her and those she cared about. For such a purpose, she was willing to endure all kinds of suffering torments. As long as she could become stronger by tolerating any kind of suffering in exchange, she wouldn't give in. A violent surge of spiritual power washed over her body and kept flowing all the way through, ultimately gathering in her dantian. Then, her originally vast dantian, at this moment gradually became larger as a tiny whirlpool formed. Hushi's whole body began to slowly emit a multicolored light. On the outside of the inheritance void, the imprint of Zijian's master was leisurely watching the two people who were in the middle of being tested. When he saw Feng Lianying pull out the spirit powder pill and swallow it, a corner of his mouth couldn't help but lift into a sneer. Such a mighty gold core stage martial artist can't actually bear such a test of willpower. While on the contrary, that little girl of foundation establishment stage is better. She clearly isn't aware that this test, although painful, is the best place for gold core stage martial artists to cultivate. She really doesn't know how to use things to the best of her advantage. After that, his gaze turned to look at Hushi, his brows slightly wrinkling. This little girl's state and willpower is really formidable. It's enough to easily intimidate people. Yet after all, She's only a foundation establishment stage martial artist. I'm afraid that for her to pass this test is, perhaps." Suddenly, the imprint of Zijian's master's voice halted, his face a mask of shock. This little girl, what is she doing? In the inheritance void, the multicolored lights from Hushy's body became brighter and brighter, while a tiny vortex began to appear in her dantian. As the vortex spun, the spiritual energy in the inheritance void began to frantically enter Hushy's body. Along with the spiritual energy, her meridians that had barely been tolerating the pain of burning heart and forged body slowly started to restore and become even tougher. Was that even possible? The imprint of Zijian's master exclaimed lightly, and following this, his face broke into a delighted smile. Perhaps, just maybe, this little girl could really create a miracle. In the inheritance void, following the spiritual energy entering Hushy's body, Hushy could feel the pain in her body slowly beginning to decrease and her cultivation base starting to advance once more. Slowly, she went from the middle of foundation establishment stage, advancing to the peak of foundation establishment stage. Moreover, she could feel that after going through this process of burning heart and forged body, her meridians and dantian had become much stronger than before. On top of that, the impurities that had been accumulating because of absorbing too much spiritual energy from foreign sources had also disappeared without a trace. She, Hushy, had become stronger once more. Suddenly, she heard a familiar deep and quiet voice in her ears. "Congratulations. Together the both of you have passed the test of burning heart and forged body." Hushy was surprised, and as she opened her eyes, it was to see the scenery before her eyes starting to blur. When she could focus once again, she was startled to find that she now appeared in a refined, simple, and unadorned room. Sitting on an armchair near the front of the room there was a young man with a graceful mien. He was none other than the imprint of Zijian's master, who had been speaking in the inheritance void a moment ago. Standing beside Hushy there was a woman dressed in white, and as soon as Hushy saw her, she frowned slightly. Feng Lianing. So she even entered Zijian Palace too. When Feng Lianing noticed Hushy standing undamaged in front of her, she almost crushed her own teeth due to hatred. This stinky boy, obviously his cultivation base was as low as an ant's, so how could he be so lucky every time? He was even able to survive the pain of burning heart and forged body. Chapter 229. Avoid choking. A trace of killing intent flashed in Feng Lianying's eyes, but quickly disappeared and was replaced by a gentle smile on her face. "Young Master Shi, this is such a coincidence. I didn't expect to see you in here. I wonder how young Master Shi was able to find Zijian Palace?" Without any expression on her face, Hushy indifferently said, "Naturally, I have my ways. What does it concern you?" Feng Lian grit her teeth, and she released a soft laugh from her mouth. "However, I heard that if it isn't a martial artist of gold core stage or higher that enters the internal core of the secret territory, that they will be torn into pieces. For you to be able to come here, you must have a great ability?" Hushy's eyes showed a trace of impatience. "However, the Ice Lotus Fairy entered. That was how I entered too." Feng Lianing rolled her eyes, her expression somewhat bashful as she said, "It was Brother Yu who helped me to enter. He started planning this many years ago while waiting for the secret territory to open so we could hunt for treasures. Besides finding the divine treasures he desired, the most important thing he wanted was for me to enter Zijian Palace and receive the inheritance." After saying that, she suddenly paused, then said in a slightly surprised tone, "Young Master Shi, you didn't know about Brother Yu wanting to enter the secret territory? He didn't inform you that we were coming here together?" Hushy's lips flattened, her eyes appearing slightly chilly. Feng Lianing saw the change in his expression, and realizing that it wasn't really Nangong Yu who helped him enter, a burst of ecstasy immediately appeared in her eyes. Yet all that was heard from her mouth seemed to be apologies. "I'm really sorry, young Master Shi, that, when I saw that you and Brother Yu were so close, I assumed that your relationship must be very good. Therefore, I thought that Brother Yu surely would have informed you that we were entering the secret territory together. After all, Even if a low-level martial artist can't enter the internal core, with the protection of Brother Yu, an average martial artist would be able to obtain some treasures in the outer layer. It's an opportunity that'll only come once in their lifetime. I really didn't expect that Brother Yu didn't actually have any intention to bring you along. He didn't even tell you that he wanted to come to the secret territory. Anyway, Brother Yu also entered the secret territory, so the two of you could run into each other anytime. Or else you can wait until after I receive the inheritance, then I can ask him for you. Perhaps, Brother, you might be having some difficulties? Don't worry, from childhood until now, Brother Yu has always told me if he has any secrets, I will certainly ask him clearly for you. Feng Lianying's gentle voice was laced with obvious mockery, continuously resounding in Hushi's ears and making her heart irritated, while a biting cold spread throughout her body. The corners of her mouth curled into a cold smile all of a sudden, and her expression as she looked at Feng Lianing morphed into a sneer. Wait until after you receive the inheritance? Ice Lotus Fairy, isn't there something wrong with your brain? Who said that the person who will ultimately be receiving the inheritance will be you? Moreover, how I came to the secret territory is my business. That has nothing to do with Nangongyu. Even more, it has nothing to do with you. Do I need you to meddle in my business? Feng Lianying's expression suddenly sank. Then she sneered, You're merely a foundation establishment stage martial artist. The process of how you got here doesn't matter. However, just because of your luck so far, do you really think that you can compete with me over the inheritance? I advise you, young Master Shi, you should conduct yourself with integrity and not overestimate your capabilities. Hushi laughed quietly, and coming into contact with Feng Lianying's forceful power pressure, she didn't cower in the slightest as she said, whether or not it was luck, we'll know once the inheritance trial has ended. Before you boast, Ice Lotus Fairy, it's best you take it easy, so that when your words slap your face you avoid choking on your tongue. You. Feng Lianying was just about to attack, when the imprint of Zijin's master, who had been quiet until now, said, Though Zijin Palace and my Maha inheritance will dissipate from this world, along with myself, I never expected that someone would really be able to enter here. Furthermore, it was two people at once. Chapter 230. Relying on one's own ability. Hushi and Feng Lianying shivered for a moment, before their gazes then fell on the imprint of Zijin's master's image. After seeing the true appearance of Zijin's master, Hushi's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't expected that his appearance would be of one so young, or that his whole body would give off the feel of a refined scholar. From what she had heard from the little golden dragon, she had assumed that his master would have been a white-haired old man with a long beard, someone who would look like a sage. Zijin's master slightly raised his left hand as he smiled and said, Welcome to my nothingness void. Here is where my inheritance can be received. Unfortunately, my inheritance can only be given to one person, so to determine who will receive my inheritance, the two of you will have to pass 3 tests. The winner. Zijin's master was still speaking, yet Feng Lianying hurriedly stepped forward and interrupted by respectfully handing over the jade slip in her hand. Your Honor, this is the letter that my master wanted me to give you. My master said as long as you read this letter, that you'll understand and know who to choose. As she was handing over the jade slip, Feng Lianying proudly glanced at Hushi. She had total confidence that as long as Zijin's master read this jade slip, that he would certainly give the inheritance to her. However, who would have thought that he didn't bother taking the jade slip, instead laughing, No need. I know who your master is. Yet accepting you based on that old guy's reputation isn't possible. A pity really, since that old guy's reputation isn't small either. With this being the case, I will not choose who due to another's reputation. Both of you will just have to rely on your own abilities. What? Feng Lianying paled. How could this, however? She hadn't finished speaking when Zijin's master had already waved his sleeve, and suddenly a ray of light rose from the ground, wrapping around each of the two girls. When Hushi recovered her senses, she found herself floating in the air with a distant and familiar voice resounding in her ears, Sister, I will protect you. I absolutely won't let them hurt you. Hushi's body suddenly started shaking, and following that, she felt like the world was spinning in front her eyes as a white building abruptly appeared before her. That building was the orphanage where she had lived in her past life, and the scene at this time was in the orphanage's toilet. A thin and weak girl and boy were trapped in the toilet while a few people were continuously kicking them. At the same time, a couple of other people were holding dirty mops and brooms, whacking the faces of the two children now and then. The boy's frame was thinner than the girl's, but he unwaveringly shielded the girl behind him. No matter how badly he was beaten, he refused to move out of the way. They forced the boy's head into the toilet bowl as they kept punching and kicking him, excitedly yelling, "Beat these two freaks to death." Watching the boy starting to suffocate from his head being pressed into the toilet bowl, the girl finally snapped, and an intense burst of energy surged out of her body and struck all the scoundrels bullying them. This resulted in them all falling to the ground in an unconscious heap, half of them seriously injured, the rest of them barely breathing. Hushi was stuck floating in the air as she watched this scene. Stiffly biting her lip, her eyes no longer revealed their usual coldness. They were brimming with anguish and painful memories instead. That little girl was her, and the little boy protecting her with all his might was her biological little brother. After they were sent to the orphanage, because of some extraordinary abilities they had possessed that they were unable to suppress, they were regarded as freaks and often bullied by many of the other children there. At that time, after seeing her brother nearly die before her eyes, the energy within Hushi's body erupted with her fury and shocked the entire orphanage. The scene in front of her changed once again, and as Hushi floated in the air, she watched her little brother go to the dean of the orphanage without her knowing and admit that the immense energy attack was caused by him. Chapter 231. Memory May. Soon after, her little brother was taken away by a group of mysterious people who secretly sent him to an underground laboratory. When she saw this, Hushi's body began to tremble violently, the pain and anger in her chest surging like a tide. As she floated in the air with a blank stare, she watched as her little brother was pushed into the laboratory. Little by little his body was dissected, his limbs snapped and torn, and his skull scooped clean. Afterwards, he was discarded like garbage into a pile of waste. Watching this scene, Hushi felt a fury so destructive that it could destroy heaven and exterminate earth surge up within her, causing her to almost lose her mind and make her wish she could kill all the people in this world. Like a wounded cub, she roared as she charged towards the murderers of her brother in the scene below her feet. However, the scene suddenly changed once again, morphing into the desert prison in ADX. In order to rescue her partner, Lungya, she broke into the prison alone. Yet in exchange for her efforts, Lungya had stabbed a dagger into her chest. Lungya had wanted her for himself, and when he had realized that it wouldn't ever be possible, he decided that if he couldn't have her, no one could, and felt that it was better to kill her. The organization had taken advantage of her, and when they had felt threatened by her, they had decided to kill her. In her past life, she was like a chess piece, constantly being manipulated by fate and other people, with no freedom and no way to protect the people she had truly loved. Would she just accept her fate as a chess piece? No, she wasn't willing at all. In this life, she wanted to become stronger than anyone else so no one would be able to hurt her, and no one would be able to manipulate her. Hushi suddenly opened her eyes, and before her was the familiar elegant room and Zijin's master's smiling features. Wiping the perspiration off her forehead, her hand felt cold and clammy. Suddenly, she heard Feng Lianying's taunting voice say, "You couldn't even pass such a simple refined heart spell, but you still wish to compete with me over Zijin Palace's inheritance." Hushi glanced briefly at Feng Lianying and saw her leisurely relaxing, her manner more fitting to someone who hadn't just been completely trapped in a memory maze. Hence Hushi couldn't help but sneer, passing the test by relying on spiritual items and therefore cheating. "What qualifications do you have to mock me?" "You." Feng Lianying's face flushed red, but when she looked at the smiling yet pensive look on the face of Zijin's master, she couldn't help but push down her anger as she didn't dare act rashly. She had indeed depended on the spiritual items given to her by her master, so of course she had effortlessly passed the refined heart spell. But how could this stinky boy know that? Zijin's master laughed slightly and said, "No matter how you did it, congratulations to the both of you on passing the first examination. The result of this test was a tie, and now the second test will begin." Feng Lian-ing was dissatisfied. Obviously, she was the first one to exit the memory maze, so why was the result a tie? Yet, before she had a chance to speak, Zijin's master once again flicked out his sleeve. Soon, dozens of porcelain bottles appeared in front of Hushi and Feng Lian-ing. Apart from the first porcelain bottle being red, these numerous bottles were all the same with no difference, and all of them were decorated with blue and white stripes. Zijin's master laughed faintly. "While the treasure you want to inherit is my Maha inheritance, the greatest pride in my life was my alchemy technique, and it beats the inheritance due to my somewhat unique healing techniques. Therefore, this second test will be testing your medical expertise." In front of each of you, there is a red porcelain bottle. In this red bottle, there is a highly poisonous medicinal pill called dense viper orchid. This dense viper orchid was something I refined when I was younger. The person who takes this pill, even if it's a nascent soul stage martial artist, will be poisoned within a quarter of an hour. Once poisoned, your body will be covered with scales, just like a snake's. But these scales don't grow outward. Rather, they grow and spread within your body until they finally erode your heart and dantian. If you're not cured in the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, then even God can't save you. Chapter 232. The greatest pride to depend on Feng Lianing sucked in a cold breath, and her face turned an extremely ugly shade. She was well aware of how terrible dense viper orchid was, because even her master had mentioned this poison once before. Nevertheless, with a grave face, she glanced at Zijin's master, wondering what he intended bringing out this poison. A sharp glint flashed in Zijin's master's eyes. Then he continued, "What you have to do is take this dense viper orchid, and before you die due to being poisoned, you have to find dense viper orchid's antidote amongst the remaining 30 bottles of medicinal pills. These 30 bottles of medicinal pills contain nearly the exact same attributes as the real antidote, be it color, scent, or accumulation of spiritual power. Apart from the real antidote, none of them have any effect at all, and in case you take them, they will cause the effects of dense viper orchid to accelerate instead. Therefore, for this test, it's up to either of you to decide whether or not you want to participate, so you should think it over properly yourselves." Hushi took 2 steps forward, and picking up 2 of the small bottles, she opened the stoppers and sniffed. Sure enough, regardless of the shape, color, or scent, there was no difference. Finding dense viper orchid's antidote wasn't difficult. What was difficult was when this kind of extremely poisonous pill was ingested. As the time limit for taking the antidote approached little by little, with frightening scales slowly appearing in the body, how could any ordinary person still stay calm enough to differentiate which was the antidote? Hushi laughed coldly, and without a single hesitation, she picked up the red medicinal pill bottle and swallowed a pill instantly. Zijin's master raised an eyebrow with a look of surprise in his eyes. Hushi's courage really made him, who had already lived a millennium, have no choice but to admire her. The moment the dense viper orchid poison reached Hushi's stomach, a distinct red line started to trace down the veins on her arms. Slowly, this red line got longer, extending itself towards her heart. Hushi's expression sharpened with her concentration, and the speed of her hands suddenly became very fast. In the blink of an eye, all 30 blue and white striped bottles were opened, and all of the medicinal pills were poured onto a tray. Then, suddenly, a silver needle appeared gripped in one of Hushi's hands. Using the silver needle, she inserted it a little into one of the pills that she had just placed into her mouth, and the scent of spiritual herbs wafted into the air. The smell and spiritual energy properties of most medicines were very similar, so even if a common doctor in Miluo continent used spiritual power to inspect them, they still might not be able to find the real antidote. But Hushi was different. When she differentiated between medicines, she also examined them using a subtle touch and a sense of taste. Although she had tasted all kinds of herbs as a divine doctor in her past life, with this she had to distinguish the 5 elements between the 30 medicinal pills, so it wasn't like it would take no effort at all. Just 3 brief minutes later, Hashi picked up a medicinal pill, a faint smile showing on her face. Seeing that she was about to stuff the pill into her mouth, Zijin's master couldn't help but say, "You still have a lot of time to examine the rest, so there's no need to be so hasty with deciding. If you swallow the wrong pill, it's very possible that you will immediately die from the poison. Have you thought about it properly?" A glint of confidence flashed in Hashi's eyes. Then, without the slightest hesitation, she swallowed the pill. Showing a reckless smile, she said, "I apologize. I always firmly believe in my medical expertise. Even if you've lived 1,000 years old man, Zijin's master, it's not likely that you'll be able to ever surpass me in medical expertise." This is Hashi's greatest pride that she depended on. As expected, after the medicinal pill entered her stomach, the poison source that had been circling her dantian was instantly neutralized. Zijin's master's face showed disbelief and admiration. His gaze as he looked at Hashi was becoming more and more amiable. Chapter 233. Regardless of life or death, Hashi's gaze indifferently landed upon Feng Lian-ing. "Ice Lotus Fairy, I've already passed my part of the test. Since it seems that you're reluctant to swallow the medicinal pill, does that mean you're ready to forfeit the inheritance?" "Why would I give up?" Feng Lian-ing shouted in a frail tone, her whole face flushing a deep red. "Anyway, it's merely differentiating the antidote, that's all. Do you think I'll lose to you?" With that, she poured out a pill from the red bottle. But just as she was going to stuff the pill into her mouth, there was distinct fear in her eyes. This was dense viper orchid. Once it was swallowed, the whole body would be covered with scales, becoming more ugly than a beast's. Hashi saw that Feng Lianing was so scared that her face had turned white, so she couldn't help but shake the empty red bottle held in her hand and leisurely say, "Ice Lotus Fairy, there's no need for you to force yourself. If you don't dare to swallow the pill, then you had better immediately admit defeat." "Who said I don't dare?" Feng Lianing felt her anger surge as she was taunted by Hashi, and without thinking, she swallowed the pill. A red line soon appeared on her fair arm, and like a line of death, it continually spread towards her heart. Feng Lianying's eyes filled with horror, and even her movements of seeking the antidote by opening the white and blue striped bottles became frenzied. This caused the bottles to knock into each other and produce clanking sounds as she searched. As time passed and was about to run out, Feng Lianing still hadn't found the antidote. "Arg, I don't want to become ugly." Feng Lianing looked at the skin on the back of her hand, and finally unable to bear it any longer, she collapsed to the ground. "Save me! Zijin's master, save me!" However, Zijin's master had no intention of saving her, and with the same gentle smile on his face as before, he said, "All the tests need to be accomplished by the prospective new owner of the inheritance. Regardless of life or death, it's the responsibility of your own misfortune or good luck, so it's unnecessary for me to save you." Feng Lianing looked at Zijin's master, then looked at Hashi watching indifferently from the side. With a hateful look aimed at the two of them, she grit her teeth till they nearly broke. Eventually, while still clenching her teeth, she fished out a tiny silver-white jade bead that she had kept hidden on her body all this time. Firmly pinching it to crumbs, she then smeared it onto her eyelids. The next moment, Feng Lianying's eyes shined brilliantly, and her weak divine sense suddenly increased. Looking once more at the black pills that she had previously poured out, her eyes soon lit up as she picked up one of them and quickly swallowed it. As soon as the antidote entered her body, the red line and dark patch on her hand disappeared without a trace in a flash. Her dantian that had already started burning quickly restored to its original state, the poison finally cured. Zijin's master laughed faintly, then stood up to say, "Congratulations to the both of you. You both passed the second test once again. However, again, The outcome isn't decided on who will be able to receive the inheritance, so we can only proceed to the third test to see the result. When Hushi heard that, her expression was only indifference. Feng Lianying, on the other hand, tightly massaged her arms, her eyes lowered. During the test a moment ago, she had used the precious bright sense bead that her master had given her. Unfortunately, the bright sense bead was a single-use only item. When it was used against an enemy, it could increase her divine sense to limitless possibilities, increasing her speed and 5 senses. It was a very formidable weapon that could save one's life, but today, she had unexpectedly used it in such a place. Moreover, just because she was too late in detoxifying the poison, while most of the scales on her skin had disappeared, she now had a black mark remaining on her left arm. Feng Lianying had always been beautiful, yet now she had such an ugly mark on her flawless left wrist. How could she be willing to accept this? Chapter 234, Life Spirit Beast, Qing Sha, Shiyu. All of this was caused by that bastard, Shiyu. Just wait until she received the inheritance. When she departed Zijin Palace, she would definitely dismember his body into pieces. Zijin's master was in high spirits as he observed the reaction of the two people. Then slightly flinging out his sleeve, the scene before their eyes immediately changed. Suddenly, they appeared in an expansive garden, and crouching in the middle of the garden there was a huge ferocious beast the size of a small hill. This ferocious beast's physique was somewhat similar to a bear's, but its face resembled a dog's. At this moment, it was half lying on the ground, appearing a bit comical. When Zijin's master saw this ferocious beast, his face became gentle and he walked up to the ferocious beast. Reaching out his hand, he stroked its fur as he said, "This is a life spirit beast that I subdued in Miluo continent when I was younger. Qing Sha. He is also one of my most important companions. Your third test is to make Qing Sha acknowledge you. Whoever can gain Qing Sha's approval can become the owner of Zijin Palace." As if responding to Zijin's master's words, Qing Sha quickly poked Zijin's master with its big head, acting all coquettish and clingy. Standing on the side, Feng Lianying's gloomy face finally revealed a smile. Taking a step forward with confidence, she laughed gracefully before asking, "Zijin's master, this time can you let me try first?" Zijin's master nodded. "You may." Feng Lianying leisurely moved forward, and as she passed beside Hushi, her steps suddenly halted, the corner of her mouth lifting into a strange smile. "May I ask Zijin's master, if I'm able to tame this spirit beast, doesn't that mean that I would immediately become the inheritor of the inheritance?" Zijin's master was slightly startled for a moment, a glint of light flashing across his eyes. He then smiled as he nodded. "Exactly. Qing Sha will only recognize one master, so no matter who gets the recognition of Qing Sha, that person will receive the inheritance." After hearing that, the smile on Feng Lianying's face immediately became brilliant and proud. Then, she turned to Hushi and faintly said, "Young Master Shi, it wasn't easy for you to come here, but unfortunately, the conclusion will disappoint you. I will certainly become the inheritor of Zijin Palace. After all, Brother Yu is still eagerly awaiting my good news." After that, without waiting for Hushi to respond, Feng Lianying's figure flashed as she floated like a fairy and landed in front of the spirit beast, Qing Sha. Feng Lianying wasn't acting blindly. She had genuine confidence in herself. Her reputation in Miluo continent as the young clan head of the Luli sect, with the title of Ice Lotus Fairy and mid-level member of the Doctor Association, had spread far and wide. But few people knew that she, Feng Lianying, was also a master beast tamer. Relying on her own strength, she had already formed contracts with 3 spirit beasts, all of them quite highly ranked. Being presented with this third test, it was just like it was custom-made for herself. What reason would there be for her to not win? Feng Lianying faintly laughed, and slightly lifting her still spotlessly fair wrist, an exquisite little silver bell soon appeared in front of her. As her delicate hand gently swung the little bell, A melodious and beautiful tinkling sound could be heard. Seeing this bell, Zijin's master couldn't help but look up with the hint of an interested smile. The yin and yang bell, that's rather interesting. That old man really gave any spiritual item to his treasured disciple. The bell's ringing didn't cause any reaction at first, but after a while, Qing Sha's eyes lost their focus and became somewhat vague. Seeing this happen, Feng Lianing was overjoyed and swayed the little bell in her hand faster. As the tempo became faster and more coherent, the bell tones came together and formed a slightly queer melody. Chapter 235. The Risk of Being Bitten Back. As Hushi watched, Qing Sha's eyes slowly changed from being unable to focus to lifeless and dull. Then, with involuntary movements, it step-by-step walked towards the direction of Feng Lianing. Watching the unfocused and uncontrolled state of Qing Sha, Hushi's eyebrows creased. If she hadn't guessed wrongly, Feng Lianing was using an enchantment technique. Moreover, if this technique was used on a low-level spirit beast, it would damage the spirit beast's divine sense, resulting in it becoming a puppet that had no choice but to obey all orders. It could be said that spirit beasts that had been tamed this way hadn't properly made a contract with their master, and instead, they were just a mere tool being controlled. As Qing Sha's eyes continued to lose their focus, it had slowly walked in front of Feng Lianing, following her order of crawling on the ground. A glint of excitement flashed in Feng Lianing's eyes, and her hand continuously shook the bell. Gently extending her other hand, she placed it on top of Qing Sha's head, slowly releasing her new level of spiritual power and wrapping it around its head. Not a moment later, Qing Sha's eyes slowly started to focus, but it had become very meek, as if it was only a house dog crouching before Feng Lianing. Successfully tamed, Feng Lianing was no longer able to suppress the proud look on her face. As she stopped shaking the bell in her hand, she took a step forward towards Zijin's master and bowed. Zijin's master, luckily I didn't fail to accomplish this test. I've tamed Qing Sha. However, there was no change to the expression on the face of Zijin's master, except for a corner of his mouth lifting into a meaningful smile. Oh, are you sure? Feng Lianing stared blankly for a moment, and just as she was about to ask him what his words meant, her complexion suddenly changed. Qing Sha, who had up until this moment been completely meek, abruptly released a snarl, a burst of formidable spiritual pressure exploding from its entire body. This kind of spiritual pressure far surpassed what a gold core stage martial artist could take, and Feng Lianing was caught completely off guard, directly struck by that spiritual pressure. Combining this with the effort she had used for the enchantment technique, and she was too powerless and ended up spitting out a mouthful of blood, before her entire body then fell weakly to the ground. Raising her head, she looked at Qing Sha, who had snarled at her in disbelief, murmuring, "How could this be possible? My method for taming beasts, how could it fail?" A glint of ridicule flashed within the eyes of Zijin's master as he replied, "Oh, I forgot to warn you too. Being threatened and forced are the things that my Qing Sha loathes the most. You have to make him want to recognize you. For example, you have to make him willing to do it. Otherwise, you have to bear the risk of being bitten back." After hearing that, Feng Lianying's complexion paled further, her heart brimming with unwillingness and resentment since she had failed the final test. However, just thinking that if she couldn't do it, then it would be near impossible for that stinky boy to accomplish it. With that thought in her mind, her heart felt a little better. As long as he couldn't do it, then the result would be a draw, and she would still have a chance. She was determined to win Zijin Palace's inheritance. After Zijin's master finished warning the two of them, he looked at the current ferocious appearance of his spirit beast and couldn't help but shake his head. Qing Sha is now in a bad mood. Its temperament will be more violent than usual. I'm afraid that if you still want to tame it, that it will be extremely difficult. Hushi crossed her arms as she examined this huge spirit beast growling angrily, pondering how she was going to make it submit to her. She was different to the martial artists of this world, as in regards to spirit beasts, Her concept of them from the beginning was limited to her adorable Dandan and that smelly little golden dragon. As for how to subdue ordinary spirit beasts, she really had no idea at all. However, seeing this spirit beast with a head like a dog and a body similar of that to a bear's, Hushi suddenly remembered the wild animals of her past life. How would she have gotten a wild animal to be obedient back then? At least, obedient in the shortest amount of time? After thinking about it for a while, Hushi's eyes suddenly lit up. Then, she slowly strode towards Qing Sha, but when Qing Sha saw someone approaching it, it suddenly raised its body up from its crouched position. With its mouth wide open like a sacrificial bowl, it released a warning snarl, as if in the next moment it would swallow Hushi whole. Chapter 236, Gluttonous Nature. With such a scene before her, Hushi wasn't afraid in the slightest. Instead, she extended her hand to lightly touch the tip of Qing Sha's tongue as it poked out from its huge mouth. In the next moment, the thing that made Feng Lianying and Zijin's master stupefied occurred. The spirit beast that had been looking like a monster with bared fangs suddenly quieted down. It even smacked its lips while revealing an expression of joy. Zijin's master was stunned. Yet when he saw something sparkling flash within Hushi's palm, he chuckled wryly. So, it was like that. That girl unexpectedly used that method to tame his Qing Sha. That girl was simply too clever. Now that the fierce and terrifying looks Qing Sha had been making a moment ago were no more, it was currently behaving like a real pet dog, incessantly rubbing against Hushi with eager and expectant expressions. Then, Hushi turned her wrist, and soon a piece of cake dropped onto her palm, the cake emitting rich spiritual energy along with a sweet smell. This wasn't just an ordinary piece of cake, but rather, she had produced this cake after mixing in a small amount of spirit water and basing it on the cheesecake recipes from her past life. She had known that the spirit beasts of this world had preferences similar to that of humans, and furthermore, that many spirit beasts liked honey desserts. Although she didn't know how to tame spirit beasts, she did know that it was common to have a gluttonous nature in this world. Without mentioning spirit beasts, even intellectual people like Nangong Yu found the deliciousness of the superb cake on Hushi's hand hard to resist. Everyone watching fell into an unspeakable silence. So when Feng Lianying saw Qing Sha rubbing against Hushi with its big head, she couldn't believe her eyes. She had relied on her skills as a master beast tamer and the secret treasure, the yin and yang bell given to her by her master, to help her. Unfortunately, even she was unable to tame the spirit beast. Yet to her surprise, under this stinky boy, Shiyu's hands, it had become so obedient. How could this be possible? That brat must have used some shameful method and cheated. That must be it. Zijin's master quickly recovered, then faintly laughed before he said, "The outcome of the third test has been decided. Little boy, I congratulate you on receiving my Maha inheritance." A corner of Hushi's mouth curled up into a meaningful smile, but before she even had time to speak, Feng Lianying started screaming out of control. "This is impossible. I don't believe that he was able to tame Qing Sha. Even I, a gold core stage master beast tamer, was unable to subdue that ferocious beast. So how could he, mere trash on Qi refining stage, have been able to subdue it? I'm sure he must have used some sort of shameful trick. Zijin's master, you're a wise person, so by all means you shouldn't be deceived by him." A trace of contempt rapidly flashed within the eyes of Zijin's master, but the expression on his face didn't change in the slightest as he indifferently said, "During this third test, the one who relied on their own ability and the one who cheated, I indeed saw it all clearly. When you used a spirit powder pill to avoid feeling the pain of burning heart and forged body, I didn't interfere and allowed you to pass. Do you really think that I knew nothing about your little tricks? That's different." Feng Lianying shouted quietly, but then the complexion on her face darkened into an ugly shade of red. What Zijin's master said wasn't wrong. If she could use small tricks to pass the tests, then why couldn't that stinky boy? She had cheated her way through all of the tests, so what qualifications did she have to accuse him? But, For the purpose of obtaining this inheritance, how many years had they, the Luli sect, been preparing? How much of their strength and their resources had they spent? Even her master had given her precious treasures over, even though she normally guarded them carefully. And when she had done so, she had repeatedly told Feng Lianing that she must receive the inheritance. Chapter 237. Spiritual sense. Now, with such an outcome, how could she be willing to accept it? Feng Lianing grit her teeth, and after aiming a look of resentment towards Hushi, she then turned her gloomy and cold gaze towards Zijin's master. Zijin's master, are you really disregarding the old kindness of my family head and giving Zijin Palace's inheritance to this stinky brat? Don't forget, his cultivation base is merely on Qi refining stage, and moreover, he is insupportable and has no foundations. Plus, he has no family background. So when the time comes that people under heaven know about the matter of him receiving the inheritance, he might even be unable to keep his small life. Zijin's master, aren't you worried that your inheritance might cease to exist in his hands? Not waiting for Zijin's master to reply, Feng Lianing raised her chin in arrogance and continued, but with my Luli sect it's different. If the inheritance is in my hands, I can ensure I'll make the best use of it. With the power and influence of my Luli sect, who in this land would dare to covet it? On top of this, my family head will owe you a big favor as well. Such a result has many advantages, without disadvantages, for Zijin's master. Hence, Zijin's master, you really won't consider it once again? Finished saying these words, Feng Lianying's confidence was brimming. She believed that as long as people had a brain, they would know how to choose. This stinky brat she used cultivation base was low. He had a lowly status, and except for his good luck in passing the 3 rounds of assessments, what else did he have? However, contrary to what Feng Lianing expected, after Zijin's master heard her speech, a glint of coldness flashed within his eyes as sharp as a blade. Then suddenly, a burst of icy cold power pressure erupted from his body. It seems that I've forgotten to tell you. I'm the same as Qing Sha, and one of the things I loathe the most is when other people threaten me. Your skills are inferior. You lost the competition, and in spite of everything, you still dare to talk nonsense in here. You're overestimating your capabilities. Considering your master's face, I'll spare your life today, but right now, I want you to immediately leave this inheritance void. Don't let me see you again. His words had barely fallen when Feng Lianing felt a sharp pain throughout her entire body, and in the blink of an eye, she sank into darkness. Feng Lianying's figure gradually dissipated, leaving only Hushi and Zijin's master in the inheritance void. The body of Zijin's master then slowly floated upwards in the void, his deep and low voice resonating as if it was being projected from the horizon. Little girl, are you ready to receive the inheritance? Hushi nodded, her expression showing rare respectfulness. Many thanks to Senior for bestowing such a generous gift. The face of Zijin's master showed the traces of a satisfied smile, and next moment, he and Qing Sha's figures suddenly exploded into blinding white lights. The white lights scattered in all directions, the sight resembling fireworks blooming from afar. Then, these lights rapidly shot towards Hushi, drilling into her mind and body. Hushi uttered a muffled groan as she felt a strange energy incessantly surging and circulating within her body, which then slowly converged around her dantian. And in her mind an avalanche of information began to appear, along with the words from Zijin's master. Little girl, in this secret territory, Qing Sha and I were only the remaining wisps of spiritual sense. And only by obtaining a spiritual sense are you then able to open the divine key and practice the methods of my Zijin technique, the Maha inheritance, to your heart's content. After you've completed the acceptance of the inheritance, Zijin Palace will disappear, and you will become the new owner of this secret territory. However, if you genuinely want to control the secret territory, you still need to do a lot of things. Hushi's brows creased. Zijin's master had said that she would become the new owner of the secret territory, but he didn't actually say how she would control the secret territory, right? Does this mean that she would have to explore the entire secret territory? Currently, the secret territory was crawling with gold core stage and above martial artists. Moreover, there were many dangerous places with layer upon layer of protection, causing Hashi to feel her scalp become numb. If she wanted to explore the secret territory with her current strength, it would be even harder than reaching the sky. Chapter 238, Feng Lianying's Jealousy. However, when Hashi heard Zijin's master talking about the contents of the Maha inheritance, she immediately tossed her concerns about the rest of the matters to the back of her mind. This then left only excitement and expectations in her heart. The ability of the Maha inheritance was apparently duplication, the power to duplicate other people's abilities and even their cultivation methods. Of course, in the early stages, it was impossible to have such a large ability. At most, it could only duplicate the abilities of a martial artist at a lower cultivation level than herself. However, when it reached peak level, there was an 80% probability that it could completely duplicate the cultivation methods of a martial artist that was one level higher than herself. A 50% chance that it would duplicate the cultivation method of a martial artist 2 levels higher than herself, and a 10% chance that it would duplicate the cultivation method of a martial artist 3 levels higher than herself. Moreover, once the divine key was opened, the martial artist's spiritual sense and essence power would be greatly enhanced, helping her to rapidly master any cultivation methods to advance. As a result, her progress would be more than twice as fast as other martial artists. Hashi pushed down the exclamation that surged forth in her heart, and sitting cross-legged, she began to slowly refine and link up the spiritual sense Zijin's master had left for her in the inheritance void. Only through absorbing the spiritual sense could the divine key be opened, and this could then be considered as completely receiving the inheritance. By then, her strength would also greatly improve. And at this moment, on the outside of the inheritance void, Feng Lianying, who had suffered from Qing Sha's bite and the forced banishment of Zijin's master, slowly woke up with her complexion an ugly shade. Straight after she awoke, she then spat out a mouthful of blood, her pretty face pale and unhealthy looking. Reaching into a pocket of her robes, she fished out a jade tablet that immediately started emitting a faint light. When Zijin's master had expelled her from the inheritance void, he had used quite a lot of power. He had initially hoped that she would be incapacitated for about an hour, giving Hashi plenty of time to finish receiving the inheritance. However, Zijin's master didn't foresee that Feng Lianying would have actually brought a wind seal with her. With that kind of treasure on her, it would allow her to become clear-headed in just a short half an hour. Feng Lianying's delicate hand tightly clenched the jade tablet, revealing traces of the veins on the back of her hand. She's awake. But so what? In the end, she didn't get Zijin Palace's inheritance. She lost to that stinky brat. She had spent so much to get to this point, yet stumbled on the final hurdle. How would she explain this to everyone in the Luli sect, and even more, explain it to her master? Feng Lianying raised her head. Seeing Hashi sitting cross-legged in meditation in front of her, an intense jealousy and murderous rage suddenly lit up within her eyes. Abruptly standing up, she then pulled out her long sword and engulfed it in a blazing flame. All of this was because of that bastard. He had brought trouble to her by causing her to lose the inheritance, which would result in her losing face when she returned to her sect. Today, even if she had to risk being banished from the secret territory by Zijin's master, she must kill this wretched boy. The sword lit up, and like lightning, it shot forth towards the clueless and unaware figure of Hashi. She had thought that this lad's body would be stabbed by the sword, and furthermore, he would be burnt to ashes by the flame. However, the blood-splattering display that she had expected to see didn't actually happen, and instead, Feng Lianying heard a bang, and her long sword was unexpectedly blocked by a golden barrier. Feng Lianying was startled, and soon heard the rage-filled voice of Zijin's master say, "I told you before, it's forbidden to use violence within Zijin Palace. Why are you still here?" Quickly get lost, otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Zijin Palace started shaking following the command of Zijin's master, seeming to express his wrath. Feng Lianying's hand holding the sword couldn't help but tremble, while her face revealed the mixed emotions of unwillingness, jealousy, anger, and resentment. This made her previously beautiful face become twisted with a sort of sinister maliciousness. Chapter 239. You cannot harm my mother under Hushy's clothes. The little golden dragon was a bundle of nerves as he stealthily watched Feng Lianying's reactions. At the same time, he was also trying to appease Dandan and pushing away his small claws. Even though she was clearly unwilling, they watched as Feng Lianying carried her sword with her as she walked out of Zijin Palace, causing the little golden dragon to finally heave a long sigh of relief. Then, turning towards Dandan with a proud smile, his mouth noisily opened and closed as he said, "See, I told you that I could handle that evil woman." However, the little golden dragon had yet to finish speaking when Dandan suddenly cried out in alarm, and his pale pink body abruptly swelled as blinding lights burst from his body. The next moment, a bang echoed throughout the room, and the two little spirit pets flew out from under Hushy's clothes to land heavily fell upon the ground. Dandan uttered a painful wail and his swollen body deflated at a speed faster than the naked eye could follow, becoming smaller and smaller. His pig appearance seemed to have lost all moisture, and his soft skin was no longer as shiny and smooth as before. Rather, it was now all wrinkled, as if completely dried out. "Dandan, are you okay?" The little golden dragon cried out in fear, shock and terror clearly written across his face. This foolish little pig, in order to protect him. I had thought that it was truly an order from Zijin's master, yet as it turns out, it was only two cunning little beasts. I was almost deceived by the two of you. When the little golden dragon heard that, he raised his small head and furiously said, "My master has already begun the process of receiving the inheritance of Zijin Palace, which means that he will soon become the owner of this secret territory. The younger family member of Zijin's master. If you dare harm my master, be careful because Zijin's master will definitely seek you out to pay back your debt." Upon hearing that, Feng Lianying burst into a fit of laughter. "Since you said that the acceptance has just began, then that means it's not yet complete. If I kill him now, he's not a descendant of Zijin's master, so naturally no one will take revenge on behalf of him. What's more, can it be that you really think my Luli sect is afraid of Zijin's master?" After saying that, the look on her face suddenly became fierce and she gloomily said, "If I can't receive the inheritance, then I won't let others receive it either." With that remark, her figure flashed as she charged straight towards Hushy cloaked in an intense murderous aura. "Mother!" Dandan cried out loudly, and without thinking, his figure once again swelled as he pounced over before Hushy. "You cannot harm my mother." The power of a gold core stage martial artist's sword was very formidable, and Dandan was merely a newborn primary spirit. How could he withstand it? When the sword pierced his body, Dandan let out a shrill scream, and in a flash he fell into Hushy's arms as he spat out a mouthful of blood. His previous pink skin was now nearly completely covered in wrinkles and lifelessly dull. It was as if he would shatter into a million pieces at any time. But the next moment, Dandan shockingly grew even larger to protect Hushy. His voice was brimming with fear and tears, but it also carried stubbornness and the strong conviction of one prepared to sacrifice their life for their beliefs as he said, "You cannot harm my mother. Mother, don't be afraid. Dandan will certainly protect you." Feng Lianying withdrew her long sword, and as her towering figure looked down at the little pig who was firmly protecting Hushy, she sneered in contempt. "Based on what abilities do you want to block me? Such nonsense. Well, since you're so anxious to court death, then I shall kill you and your master." "Little foolish pig, are you insane? Hurry up and run away. She's a gold core stage martial artist. How could you be her opponent? If you continue like this, you'll die." Dandan firmly shook his head, stubbornness and persistence showing on his face. Mother is the best mother in this world. Dandan will absolutely not abandon Mother to run away. If you're afraid, then you can go. Chapter 240. Dying, how could I be afraid? When the little golden dragon heard the last sentence, he stomped in anger as he scolded. Who said I would ran away? I only wanted to deceive that shameful woman. That's all. You're merely a gold core stage martial artist. Do you really think that I'm afraid of you? Upon saying that, the little golden dragon leaped in front of Dandan and started to curse as he faced Feng Lianing. You're such a venomous-hearted woman. I'm not saying your looks are ugly, but that your heart is so vicious. It's no wonder that Zijin's master doesn't give you the inheritance. Take a look at my master. In comparison to your looks, his are more beautiful than yours, and his ability is higher than yours. Which idiot would choose you, an ugly woman, over my master instead? Standing behind the little golden dragon, Dandan promptly joined in with, Exactly, exactly. Such an ugly woman. She can't even compare to one of Mother's fingertips. Cross-eyed, hooked nose, toady face, and ugly looks with a vicious heart. Be careful in the future. When you give birth to a son, he won't have a butthole, and after you die, you'll go straight down to the 18 levels of hell. Since Dandan had still been inside his huge egg from the beginning, his knowledge was now incomplete. Each of his owners had had different personalities, so naturally he received all different kinds of information, including some things that were weird. Now that he was angry and worried, he spat out the most vulgar curse words that he had learnt. If Hushi was awake at this moment and could hear her cute and clumsy spirit pet cursing and shouting at people like a wife in the street, she would certainly be so shocked that her jaw would drop to the floor. On the other hand, when the little golden dragon heard those curses, he loudly cheered. Then, looking at Dandan as if he himself had taught him, he continued adding insults. Little foolish pig, some of your phrases were wrong. This woman is so ugly that whoever marries her will have bad luck. So how would anyone be willing to marry her? Since no one will marry her, how could she give birth to a son without a butthole? Feng Lianing was born noble, surrounded by people who flattered her, fawned upon her, and who were always trying to curry favor with her. Since she was a child up until now, she had never suffered such insults and abuse. At this moment, she only felt her chi and blood boiling, her face clearly showing murderous intent. Two lowly beasts actually dared to insult me so much. Very good. Today, I'll skin you both alive, slowly pull your tendons out one by one, and dismember your bodies piece by piece. You will then be reunited with your master in the underworld. As Feng Lianying's words left her mouth, a fireball condensed in her hand, before she then fiercely threw it towards them. In a flash, the fireball transformed into several sharp arrows, all of them heading towards Hushi, Dandan, and the little golden dragon. We can't let her hurt Mother, Dandan shouted loudly, immediately making his body swell large again to protect Hushi. The little golden dragon's complexion paled. He was more knowledgeable than Dandan, and therefore he knew just how terrible one strike from a gold core martial artist was. However, when he looked at the foolish pig behind him, completely disregarding his own life, the little golden dragon clenched his teeth and the golden light surrounding his body suddenly exploded. Boom! An earth-shattering noise was heard that caused Zijin Palace to shake, as if a major disaster had befallen them all. After the sound of the explosion quieted down, the little golden dragon fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood as he slowly started to faint. At this moment, a large area of his dragon scales were burnt, the horns on top of his head were broken, and his entire body was covered with blood and ghastly wounds. The little amount of energy that he had previously managed to collect with great difficulty after becoming unsealed was now completely used up. Dandan started crying after seeing such a miserable appearance, and his body rapidly shrunk back to normal size as he went to the little golden dragon's side. Long, Are you all right? Why don't die? Little foolish pig. The little golden dragon spat out another mouthful of blood and foam, baring his teeth as he said, "Don't you know who I am? How can I die? So easily." He was unable to finish what he was saying before he fainted, the golden light around his body fading without a trace. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.